welcome to Liquid Lunch. It is me, Hugh, and I have a different co-host today. We've tried her before, but we're trying her again. Lalo Singh.
Hey everybody in internet television land, it's me again.
You're probably looking at the wrong camera, because that's Paul over there with that special camera. It's
Okay.
high quality. So we're here on the show today, and we've got a special show because we've got two guests. We got Will Arlo coming on the show, who's with the member since 2006 of the Advisory Committee of Political Parties in Ottawa. That's a body that is all about making sure that we have fair elections in this country. And of course, there's new electoral legislation coming down, which a lot of people are saying is threatening democracy in Canada. So we're going to get in depth with Will Arlo about that subject.
I'm looking forward to that.
Yes.
Looking forward to learning something about the electoral system, like the old one, and what we might have to look forward to.
The new one, which we won't even have to vote anymore because they'll have machines to do that for us, which is, a big step forward. Also, we have Tim Martin coming on the show. We're going to be talking about permaculture and, of course, being here in association with Permaculture GTA. Plus, we're all about permaculture anyway, right? Even if we don't know what it's called.
That's right, even if we don't know what it is.
Yeah, but we're going to find out what it is a little bit later in the show. And we've got Bauman Yazdan Far joining us here at the table right now. And I know, Bauman, you are very interested in this whole electoral reform issue, right?
Of course. It's one of my very platforms that I am advocating for the last 5-6 years.
Yeah, and people should know that you're here to just be part of this discussion. And you were running as an independent. Wait, were you an independent, or were you running for an independent party in the last by-election?
Well, there is two parts. There is federally, I am completely independent,
right.
And provincially, I register a party for the independents.
Right, and you're advocating that people get more involved in the political system.
Of course, the only purpose, I'm not delusional, I don't get elected, I know that.
Well, it might happen. There have been independents elected before. I think there's still one in Quebec City that's...
Well, most of those 4 or 5 seats that are occupied by independent mainly are for people who have been part of a mainstream political parties, and then they defected and they chose to be independent and sitting there.
Okay, so just before we take a little break and set things up for our interview with Will, just tell us why you're so concerned about this issue, and are you familiar with the Bill C-23, the new electoral bill?
Yes, I glanced at it, and I noticed there are some changes, for instance, in selecting the IDs for letting certain individuals to cast their votes, who can, who cannot, and getting some of the authorities of the Chief Electoral Officer of the Canada from his hand, and putting kind of the barrier between him and the Prime Minister's office to just adding another steps to avoid certain controversies that we witnessed during last 3 or 4 elections.
Okay, so you think Canadian democracy will be well served by this new legislation?
I don't think even if it's being served right now, let alone for the future.
Okay.
One of my points, one of the downsides of the present election act is putting the name of the parties in the ballot, which I am very opposed to that, because people are supposed to elect a representative, not a party. By putting their name, those who choose to vote, which unfortunately between 35 on by-elections go all the way to maximum of 60% in recent years.
But I think this is why we need independent candidates, and this is why if there's a whole body of people, and the reason that they're not involved is actually because there aren't enough choices, and because we need to know more about the electrical system that we're going to find out. And one of the ways that you let people know about that is you have your own show here called Independent Nation.
That's correct.
To help inform people, because the more information that we have, the more we can get involved, and really the more choices that we have.
Of course, the whole purpose is to get people involved, because the apathy of the electors really does
You can say that. That's great.
does not serve democracy.
Well, and you know, the point I've made, or we've made when we've been on the show before, Bauman, is that, you know, with political parties, you know, the members of parliament are supposed to represent the constituents, but as soon as they belong to a party, they're actually representing the interests of the party, not the interests of the constituents.
Of course, they run the mainstream political party, I might add, not fringe, because many people don't know that we have about 18, 19 registered federal political party and about 21, 22 provincial registered political party, which is not advertised to people.
Right.
But the mainstream political parties run their political party like corporations.
And of course, they're funded by often
taxpayers,
big corporate funders who,
and taxpayers.
of course, those dollars, especially when they're big amounts from a small number of large players, influences the agenda of those parties.
Well, that is why one of the new rules in the new BC 31 is to increase the amount of the donation.
Yeah.
From, I believe, 1,200 to 1,500, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not very good with numbers. But one of the reasons, probably because everything is about money for them.
Yeah. Okay, so why don't we, so thanks for coming in today and being
Thank you
part
very
of this.
much. Thank you for having me.
Bauman.
Now, we've got a little video we're just going to play right now, and it'll kind of set us up for our discussion with Will Arlo. And this is what is this video? It's the strongest statement. What is this, Paul?
Put by the Port Stanley News, and it's the strongest statement during the Will.
Well, this is just this is from the Port Stanley News, and it'll just set us up, and we're going to come back with Will Arlo right after this.
Great.
Now we will have 3 minutes closing speeches from everybody, starting with Mr. Arlo.
Well, 3 minutes, that's pretty rare. I guess what I want to do is take 3 minutes to explain to you something that happened in 2006 right here in Canada. There was a rigged election. The Conservative Party of Canada, Stephen Harper's version of it, has never legally taken power in Canada. And the reason is because there was conspiracy in the Conservative Party to go around election campaign financing rules. It's called the in and out scheme. And the strategy was to take money from the federal party coffers when they had spent their entire limit available under the law to spend on national advertising, shovel it into various candidates' accounts and right back out to buy national advertising. It was a calculated scheme to go around election advertising rules. Now, if you know anything about how marketing works, and some of you probably are starting to study marketing right now because it's important, you know that in marketing spending, where you get the biggest bang for the buck is where you top the next closest guy in the field. So that $1 million that they shoveled around the national advertising rules bought them votes. That's why they did it. And the 63 candidates that participated in that scheme should have been disqualified as members of parliament, should have been disqualified from having or being able to run for election again for 2 years. They should have paid a $2,000 fine and or 6 months in jail. So the Conservatives would have been short seats to form a government. They have never legally taken power in Canada. This is a de facto government. This is an illegal government. And it is crucial to our democracy. This is something that Michael Ignatieff knows about. It's something that Jack Layton knows about. There are 4 top Conservative apparatchiks in Canada now facing charges under the Elections Act. The law has been extraordinarily slow in rolling out on this. 4 months after the last election, there should have been a declaration from the Chief Electoral Officer of Canada, full stop, ladies and gentlemen, this election was rigged. It's null and void. We have to start over. That's what should have happened. It didn't, because the Conservatives have fought their own appointed Chief Electoral Officer every step of the way, because they know the government that they run is an illegal one. And they have systematically worked since then to undermine the institutions of Canadian democracy at every turn. And this is crucially important. We really have to understand this is stuff we think that happens in other places in the world where people are less civilized than us. Well, it happened here. They rigged the election. They stole it. They haven't formed a legal government. And we need to do something about that. It's crucially important. I just can't stress to you enough how fundamentally that undermines your citizenship. If you can't trust.
Thank you, Mr. Arlo.
Okay, welcome back to Liquid Lunch. And so there was a little video just kind of giving us some inkling of what's going on. And we've got Will Arlo joining us from the Advisory Committee of Political Parties. And Will, welcome to Liquid Lunch.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about this committee, first of all.
Well, I should be careful here to make sure that I don't allow people to go away with a misunderstanding. I'm not here as a representative of that body.
Okay.
That's an informal group. It's composed of people from Elections Canada and people from the registered political parties of Canada. And they liaise back and forth to hammer out solutions to problems with the administration of the Elections Act. Mm-hmm. That's not the capacity in which I'm here. I am a member of that committee and have been since 2006. And I've also been a member of the Technical Experts Committee that was struck by Harry Neufeld. So Elections Canada, when the voting irregularities happened in the 2011 election in Etobicoke Centre, Elections Canada saw a problem, appointed somebody, the former Chief Electoral Officer of British Columbia, Harry Neufeld, to chair a committee that was given full scope to explore solutions to those things. So that's not, I'm a member of that milieu, but that's not the auspices under which I'm here. I'm here as a citizen who's deeply concerned about the direction that Canada took in all kinds of places, but particularly here we're going to talk about the Elections Act, the directions that Canada took.
I think that's wonderful that you are here personally representing yourself, because in the intro we talked about how in politics our politicians are controlled by their sponsors and controlled by where their money comes from. And I just think it's wonderful that you're here as a part of the system and understanding how it works, but this is about your personal integrity.
Well, it's about the threat that Canada's democratic system faces now from the Conservative Party of Canada. That's what it's about, because we're in a lot of trouble, actually. The first attack by the Conservative Party against Canada's electoral system and its democratic institutions came in 2006 when, as I talked about in that video, the in and out scheme was hatched within the top echelons of the Conservative Party of Canada as a way to rig an election. And they succeeded. They got around it.
Now, okay, so briefly what that is, let's talk briefly what that in and out scheme is right here and now.
Well, the Elections Act has been in evolution since 1873 when the first iteration of the Act came into being. And so it's under continual modification to try and be current with, the social paradigm we see now. And over that time, there has, it's 435 pages long now, over 500 sections to it. The table of offenses of things as candidates or political entities you can do wrong and be punished for is 18 pages long. It's highly prescriptive about what you can and what you cannot do. And one of the things it's recognizing is advertising works, and so political parties advertise. Well, if that's the reality, then you have to put fair limits on the advertising budgets of political entities to try and make sure the playing field is something like level. And, recognizing that and how marketing works.
So what is this document that oversees our political electoral system and our politicians?
At the federal level, it is the Elections Act.
Okay.
So it describes what political entities are, how they come into being, how they cease to exist, how they're financed, how they report how they're financed. It's really, really a detailed process that almost no one in Canada knows how it works, actually. Candidates struggle to understand the system. There's a tremendous amount of administrative burden in it to be a candidate or to be an official agent or to be any other political entity. But what it boils down to is that there's a really, really prescriptive regime to control the spending that political parties are allowed to do. And what the Conservatives did in 2006 was end run that system. They broke the law. And they knew that they broke the law.
They broke the law.
They broke the law.
I was going to ask.
Does that mean that their election in that year is illegitimate?
Technically it is.
But of course, the longer it goes on without serious redress, the less relevant that looks to Canadians.
What
Right,
would
because
be
that's
the
so far in the
remedies
rearview mirror.
for this illegality, this stealing of the election in 2006? What would be the remedies to that prescribed by the Elections Act?
Well, the relevant document then would be the Elections Act of 2003, because since the Conservatives come to power, they've rewritten the Act.
Okay.
But of course, since they didn't come to power legally, you have a bit of a constitutional crisis in terms of what the law means now. When you have a de facto government making law, the farther that goes, the farther that, and the longer that goes on, the more difficult it is to deal with, because the law itself becomes illegitimate. But way back then, was anybody caught doing that. And within 4 months of a general election, all the candidates and the parties have to return to the chief electoral officer a complete accounting of the money they took in and how they spent it. And as the election goes forward, Elections Canada sends out bulletins. No one in an electoral event can claim they didn't know. It's complete falsehood, because Elections Canada tells you every step of the way what your spending limits are. If you're a candidate, if you're a party, what you can spend on advertising, all that stuff is all prescribed, and you get bulletins sent to you in the mail in a timely way. They don't come too late. It's all there. There's no one in an electoral event can claim they didn't know. Because anything that's relevant, and when you're registered as a candidate, you get a kit. You get a kit, the do's and don'ts. So it's all right there. It's big, but it's all right there in front of you. And your financial agent, as a candidate, you have an agent to make sure. The agent's job is to make sure that the candidate stays within the law. That's his number one job, to make sure the candidate doesn't break the law.
Okay. So, but we're saying that their election in 2006 was illegal. The remedies would be prescribed by the 2003 Elections Act.
Right.
And what would the remedies be?
The remedies at that time, if I remember right, would have been that the candidates who were involved in the scheme would have been disqualified. So they wouldn't have been allowed to take a seat if they had been elected. And if they hadn't been elected, they would be disqualified from becoming a candidate for 2 years.
And then what would have to happen? Would there have to be by-elections in those ridings?
Well, that's a different question, because we've never gotten to a place in Canada yet where the chief electoral officer has said the election shouldn't count because it was rigged, right? That hasn't happened yet. So, it would have been a major problem, and it would have been brand new ground constitutionally. But that we didn't go there is much worse, because the Canadian public broadly doesn't understand that the Conservatives came to power illegally.
Okay, so that was 2006.
That was 2006.
And then what have they been doing since then?
Well, since then, they've taken every opportunity they could to tinker with the Elections Act, to make it more difficult for other players, the other parties, to raise money. That's one of the principal attacks. Actually, in 2003, there was a sea change in the way elections were financed. As a member of the Canadian Action Party in 2000, we campaigned, one of the fundamental planks in our campaign was to get people to go to Elections Canada's website and click on the finance pages and see where all the money was coming from for the big power parties. And notice it was coming from two places. It was coming from the financial industry, and it was coming from unions. And it was multi-million-dollar donations. Back then, I think the Liberals received $12 million from the Royal Bank, similar size donations from other Canadian major banks. So did the Canadian Alliance Party at that time. So
does that go, those amounts that you're talking about, that goes beyond what is outlined in the Act and beyond what they're getting as guidelines?
No, those donations were within the rules at that time, because the rules said that was legal. And those corporations, those huge financial corporations, got tax receipts for that. Right. Which means ultimately Canadian citizens paid the bill. Even though it was the banks and unions that handed over the money, they got tax receipts for it. So ultimately it's Canadian taxpayers that paid the bill for that. But guess who gets the influence? When you have the Royal Bank or Bank of Montreal handing over a $12 million check to a political party, guess who gets the influence?
The bank.
The bank gets the influence. Of course they do.
Motive again, yeah.
So in 2003, that all changed. In 2003, political parties were financed by a per-vote subsidy that came directly from the Consolidated Revenue Fund. So if you voted for that party, that portion of money at that time was about $1.80. If you voted for Party A, and Party A got over a certain electoral success bar, Party A got $1.80 because you voted for them. Party B got $1.80 because you voted for them. So what was happening then was the citizens were financing elections directly by how they decided to vote. Eminently fair.
This was before 2003.
That's what happened in 2003. We got that sea change. So big money was taken out of politics.
Oh, I see. And who did that? The Liberals?
The Liberals did.
Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds like a decent change.
Oh, it was great.
In the right direction.
It wasn't complete because the small parties got nothing. If you didn't get over 2% of the national vote or 5% of any constituency vote, you got nothing. So they found a way to make sure small parties stayed small.
Right.
Right. Yeah. But it really made democracy possible. Well, in 2006, the Conservatives changed it back to the old regime.
Okay.
They started the campaign to get the public subsidy for political parties eliminated. That's now happened. That's gone. So political parties now have to raise their own funds if they're going to raise funds from the general public. And of course, the Conservatives represent the rich who have money to donate to political parties. Everybody else has to go begging from people who don't have enough money already.
Right.
Right. So the system, when it's strictly by voluntary donations of up to $1,000 or $1,500, then it just, it's a fundraising exercise then. And it's hard enough, believe me, because the Act, again, is so prescriptive about what it is you have to do to maintain registration as a political party. And if you want to develop a policy agenda for the nation and trying to articulate it, all that stuff, it's just such an onerous task for small political parties to achieve those goals that fundraising is, you have to do it, but it takes so much of your energy, whereas the bigger parties, they can hire people whose job it is just to raise money.
Yeah.
So what was it about the Conservative government in 2006 that they violated in terms of how they were conducting their finances?
Because the Election Act stipulated that as a national political party, they had a spending limit on national advertising, and they spent the full limit, bashing the Liberals over the sponsorship scandal. But they wanted to be able to continue that. Well, they looked around and they found that there were various candidates around who hadn't raised enough money to have enough money to spend their advertising limits, because candidates have a spending limit for advertising and parties have a limit for spending for advertising. So the top apparatchiks like Doug Findling and Irving Gersting, those guys at the top levels of the Conservative Party, shoveled huge chunks of money into candidates' campaign accounts and instructed the official agents to use that money to buy exactly the same advertising message that was being bought at the national level. So it was an obvious circumvention of the rules.
But is it, okay, I'm just curious, is that a violation of the law, or is that getting around in a legal way the rules? Like, did it violate the letter of the law?
Violated
as well
the
as
letter
the
and the spirit. Because, one of the offenses that is specifically mentioned in the Elections Act is conspiracy to circumvent election campaign spending rules. That's a specific offense.
Right.
It's right there in the Act. And when you're a candidate and there's an election going on, you have a hotline number to Elections Canada. If you have any questions about whether or not what you're doing is right, or if you're an official agent, you just dial that number and you say to the people who answer the phone at the other end, you say you're a candidate or you're an agent, boom, right, you go right to the auditors. They tell you what's legal and what isn't. So right there on the phone, right? And some of the Conservative candidates who were instructed by the top brass at the Conservative Party to do this in and out scheme, some of them weren't scumbags. They didn't want to do it. They didn't think it was right. They phoned Elections Canada. Is this right? Is this legal? Oh, no, it's not. So there's no claim by the Conservatives they didn't know it was illegal. Of course they knew it was illegal.
But why did Elections Canada allow it to happen if they were being
because
phoned
it's
by
criminal
the
sanction.
candidates?
They can't stop it from happening. What they can do is alert the Commissioner of Elections, and it's the Commissioner of Elections' job to look into those kinds of things. So he starts an investigation. But the investigation starts because the law prescribes, or the Act says it's that way. It's criminal sanction under which the investigation starts. So, the Commissioner has to be circumspect with regard to criminal prosecutions. So every step of the way he has to be super careful that he protects the integrity of a criminal investigation. So it takes time to roll that out. And even though the spirit of the Act says, and it's clear to anyone who looks at it that cooperation is the key. You know, if the auditors at Elections Canada who are reviewing financial return from a party or an agent or a candidate, if they say, gee, this looks funny, they'll call you and they'll say, this looks funny, what's going on? Well, you know, if you have democratically minded people, what they want to do is be in compliance with the law. They'll say, well, okay, we'll provide you with all. That's not what the Conservatives have done. Conservatives fought every step of the way, refused to turn over the information, refused to turn over. So the commissioner then had to go and get a court order for every piece of legislation. And when this hit the fan in 2006, it hit the fan after the chief electoral officer of Canada at that time, John Pierre Kingsley, resigned over the affair. He resigned. He was looking at a full-blown scandal, and he was going to be at the center of it. Now, why he resigned, you'd have to ask Jean-Pierre Kingsley, but he did. He didn't do, in my view, what he should have done. He should have alerted the Canadian public, said there was a major scandal, the Conservatives cheated, the election doesn't count, we got to figure out what to do now. That's what should have happened. But in the meantime, under the umbrella of criminal prosecutions, the Commissioner of Elections is continuing with his investigation. And the Conservative form a government. They form a government. A new chief electoral officer gets appointed, Marc Morin. He dutifully applies the law. The Conservatives attack him as if he was a stooge of the Liberals.
And all
Completely
of this
absurd.
And all of this is sort of happening in-house without, when I say in-house, I mean that between the people who are making the problem with their going outside of what the act says that a political party can do with their finances. And then the watchdogs within that system, like you've explained, that has broken down. So where does that leave us? Does that mean that, and I would love it if it meant this, and so I'm just going to ask, does that mean that, in fact, there are a whole lot of citizens, Canadian citizens, who are abiding by, right now, by a government that is legally in place, but is waiting for the proper person within the House to do an investigation and have something done about the government? Are we waiting for that?
Well, the investigations have been ongoing, and there have been charges laid with respect to the In-N-Out scandal. There were charges laid, but not everybody was charged. It turned out, I think, only 6 people at the top levels of the Conservative Party of Canada pled guilty to charges and paid fines. So that happened.
That happened, but
4 years later.
But the government was not.
The government didn't fall.
Right.
It should have.
So Marc Morin, who is he still the?
He's still the chief electoral officer.
And are these? Is this investigation still going on?
Well, the In-N-Out scheme file has whatever status it has within Elections Canada. I think it's probably deemed resolved at this point because charges were laid, people pled guilty, they paid fines. So that sort of has been resolved. But that hasn't been the end because the government that got formed illegally.
So is there any, I mean, what can Canadians do now? Can they
never vote for the Conservatives again? But
but can they do something else? Can they phone Elections Canada or Marc Morin and say, this government's illegal, can you do something about it? Can you, like, you know, we don't want to be governed by an illegal government who, and we're going to get into it a little bit later, but who continues to trash our democracy.
Hopefully, you know, something would happen if the Canadian voting public stood up and said, you can't do this, it's illegal. If, you know, who knows what would happen then. But that isn't what has happened because the mainstream media simply hasn't done a decent job of covering the events. Most Canadians have no idea how elections are financed. They have no idea how thick the rule book is, and it's thick, about what you can and can't do. Have no idea the Conservatives broke the rules, and have no idea that systematically since 2006, since Bill C-2, the first piece of legislation the Conservatives introduced in 2006 after their budget, the first piece of legislation was the start of the attack on the electoral system. They started to dismantle the public subsidies regime then, and the attacks kept coming, bill after bill after bill. Change the identification rules so voters have a tougher time voting. Well, of course, well-moneyed, stable comfortable people who vote for the Conservatives don't have any problem proving where they live, but all kinds of other people who may not have a residential address, or who may be fairly mobile because they're inner city, working, poor, don't have a current document that shows their current address. I mean, when Bill C-31 introduced the first new voter registration rules, or voter identification rules, Elections Canada did an analysis, and their analysis was this would disenfranchise 2.2 million voters in Canada.
Well, we're really happy to have you here on that channel, you know, right now, letting people know a little bit more about the Conservative government, about how they got in there, and also about how our electoral system is not allowing enough people to be able to be a part of that by this new resident attached to the identification. So I'm really glad that we're getting this information.
Well, especially because, you know, young people in particular, we've seen voter participation levels falling over the last few decades, and young people in particular are very cynical about the system. And it seems to me the Conservatives aren't doing anything to help that situation. In fact, they're not really interested in citizen participation. They just want to run with the power.
It's a nice segue into Bill C-23, actually, because as a member of ACPP, I have personal knowledge about the extent to which Elections Canada is concerned about that and doing everything they can to turn that around. And it's a lot. Believe me, there's some brilliant programs out there sponsored by Elections Canada to try and create a greater awareness of how the electoral system works and how to participate in it. And Bill C-23 is effectively introducing a measure to stop all of that.
Okay, so let's talk about Bill C-23. First of all, this is legislation coming down from the Conservative government in Ottawa.
Yep.
And it's not law yet, is that right?
It's not law yet.
So if you can just give us kind of the status of where Bill C-23 is, and then let's get into some of the fundamentals of what it's trying to do.
It's been read once. I think it's in second reading now in the House, and they have the Conservatives have put the bill under closure. In other words, they've said this is the time allocation about in which we're going to talk about this bill, and we're not going to talk about it beyond that. That's a pretty hostile approach.
Limiting the debate on
the debate. So usually when there's substantial legislation in front, there's pretty open-ended in terms of how long it gets debated. As long as people think it's worth debating, it gets debated.
Right.
But there is a measure built into the parliamentary rules that allows government to cut off debate.
Yeah.
Right. And they're using it. Conservatives use it a lot, actually.
Yeah.
So there's a whole bunch of things that C-23 does that really undermine the clout that Elections Canada as a institution defending Canadian democracy has. It muzzles the chief electoral officer, makes it, they specifically say the chief electoral officer now will no longer be able to communicate with Canadians about anything except where and how to vote.
So this is, you know, I mean, I've heard people say, and I've participated in elections too, as a scrutineer and stuff. And people, when we compare Canadian elections, say, to American elections, like they got voting machines, but our elections are pretty much decided. They're counted by hand. There's a paper trail. There's accountability. There's checking.
It's a very good system.
Cross-checking, very good system, and we know before we go to bed on election night who won the election. And there has been a sense, up until now anyway, that the elections have been fair, and it sounds like Elections Canada has been doing a pretty good job.
Elections Canada has done an amazing job. It's a great institution, and the Conservatives are just using it as a whipping boy. It's just really offensive that the attitude the Conservative Party of Canada has taken through the government towards Elections Canada. They're just wrecking it.
Okay.
All right, I thought you said we were going to get machines or something.
I was joking about that, but
Okay.
we're going to get into some of the details about this bill, but let's just take a little bit of a break now and play that second video about elections, about the elections.
Yeah, and thank you so much, Will Arlo, for being with us.
And
we're going to come back.
We're going to come back. We're
Yeah.
going to continue this conversation. We're going to find out about whether voting machines are in the offing for Canadians and Canadian elections. And so we'll be right back after this.
All right.
Nul n'est au-dessus des lois. Nul ne peut prétendre ignorer la loi pour défendre ses actions. La méthode in and out est illégale. C'est clair pour tout le monde. Le Parti conservateur a triché. Le Premier ministre garde dans son équipe les gens qui ont organisé cette tricherie. Le Premier ministre est ultimement responsable de cette tricherie. Quand le gouvernement va-t-il admettre qu'ils ont triché?
Honorable secrétaire parlementaire du Premier ministre.
Speaker, I thank my distinguished colleague for his question. The reason that we will continue to press our case in court is that Conservative candidates spent Conservative funds on Conservative advertising. Then the National Party indeed did transfer funds to local campaigns, which of course is a legal practice, and of which Elections Canada became aware precisely because we told them. We will continue in this spirit of transparency, and we will vigorously defend our actions, which have been in accordance with the rules, the laws, and the highest standards of ethics from the very beginning.
The honourable member for Toronto Danforth.
Transferred Conservative funds to break the rules on election spending limits. That's what happened. And the irony, of course, is that the Conservatives let this scandal happen in an election which they were running against a Liberal scandal, the infamous sponsorship scandal. So imagine that, moving money in and out to go after the Liberal government that was playing fast and loose with money. No wonder Canadians think something's broken up here. And yet this Prime Minister is still standing behind his actions. He says we've done nothing wrong. Why are these senators still in their caucus?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister. Ordered.
Once again, I thank the honourable member for his question. Mr. Speaker, the reason that we continue to pursue our case in the court of law is because the Conservative Party followed all the rules. It is true that Conservative candidates spent Conservative funds on Conservative advertising. It's also true that the National Party transferred funds to local campaigns. But the reason that Elections Canada knows all of that, the reason that it is aware of all of these transactions is precisely because we made them aware by volunteering the information in a transparent manner many years ago. We'll continue to press our case.
The honourable member for Toronto Danforth.
This government is already on the ropes. We've asked the government to keep their cheating senators out of the caucus. And then today, we find out that the Minister of Immigration is using government resources to solicit money for Conservative ads on parliamentary letterhead, Mr. Speaker. When are the Conservatives going to learn their lesson? When are they going to clean up their act? Why is the Immigration Minister using parliamentary resources to raise money for the Conservative Party?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister. Order.
Mr. Speaker, the Immigration Minister in this government has done a superb job at reaching out to and building a strengthened system for Canada's newcomers. We've cut the immigration landing fee. We've allowed a record number of new Canadians to come into this country. We have stood strong in favor of protecting those who are in need of refugee assistance, and we have delivered record aid to those people who are coming to this country from abroad. We're very proud of our Immigration Minister, and we stand beside him 100%.
We're here with Will Arlo, and Bauman is joining us here. Hey, Bauman?
Hey.
Because we're talking about politics. We're talking about the Elections Act and what the Conservatives are doing to democracy in Canada. And so we just started talking about Bill C-23, which is in second reading in Ottawa right now.
Yep.
Bill, can we just start to talk about, let's just get into it. What are some of the things in this act that are dangerous to Canadian democracy?
Muzzling the chief electoral officer, reducing his role to strictly administrating elections, rather than seeking initiatives to increase voter participation, rather than seeking initiatives to increase accountability and accessibility and all those kinds of things. Tons and tons of initiatives that Elections Canada undertakes to try and augment the democratic process will now no longer be an option because it won't be able to communicate with electors for those purposes.
Now, this is something they've been doing. Elections Canada has been doing these things, trying to increase participation and trying to increase the fairness of the elections.
Very much so.
But now the government's coming up with this bill that's basically throwing all that out.
That's what it anticipates, that bill, yes.
Okay. And what are some of this? Okay, so muzzling the chief electoral officer is one thing.
Yep.
And I was speaking with Anne during the break there about moving his office closer to the government in power.
Well, we're talking now, I think you're referring to the Commissioner of Elections, whose job it used to be to investigate electoral irregularities and where he thought it appropriate to lay charges. One of the first changes the Conservatives made was with Bill C-2, where they established a Department of Public Prosecutions, or with the Director of Public Prosecutions. So the change then was they limited the Commissioner's authority to simply investigations, and then making recommendations to the Director of Public Prosecutions about charges. So you see, they put another layer of subjectivity between the process of identifying and dealing with electoral irregularities and actually applying remedies.
So that means that they can't apply charges directly.
Right, right.
And when we talked about those charges from the 2006, from the In-N-Out scandal,
right,
was that done by the commissioner?
No,
directly,
see, no, it happened under the new regime because that change had already been made. So at that time, William Corbett at that time was the commissioner. So he was stripped of the power to lay charges. He had to turn over his files essentially to the Director of Public Prosecutions, who made an assessment of his own, which takes time.
Yeah.
And again, about whether or not to lay charges. And, you have to know that in the rearview mirror, he sees that his office exists at the pleasure of the Prime Minister. Right? So Harper brought him in.
Well, you see, the perfect scenario is have Chief Electoral Officer completely independent from parties and has authority to directly call on RCMP when he or his team sees that the irregularities, that borderline is fraud.
Well, the old regime was that the Chief Electoral Officer would be notified by, usually, the auditors within Elections Canada who would have identified irregularities, or by the public who would have called in with complaints. And so the Commissioner then would get direction from the Chief Electoral Officer that said, we might have a problem, check it out. And it used to be that when the Chief Electoral Officer told the Commissioner that, he would say, check it out. And of course, what would naturally follow without being said is, if appropriate, lay charges, because that's what the Act says. So the Conservative changed that. They took the decision to lay charges away from the Commissioner and gave it to the Director of Public Prosecutions. Now, this new legislation takes the Commissioner himself out of Elections Canada's offices and sequesters him in the Director of Public Prosecutions, and makes the Commissioner of Elections accountable and reportable to only the DPP. And the DPP only reports to the Solicitor General of Canada, and only does so once a year. So if there's an investigation going on about electoral fraud, which there sure ought to be, with the robocall scandal, we've had two, by the way, there's been 2 robocall scandals. So all those kinds of things, Canadians wouldn't even know about it because the Chief Electoral Officer won't be able to talk about it. And the Commissioner won't be able to talk about it to anybody but the Director of Public Prosecutions. And further, when Canadians phone in to Elections Canada saying they got robocalls that they're concerned about, or something else happened that they're concerned about, what do I do? Elections Canada used to be able to give them the answers. Now they're going to have to say, I don't know what they're going to say, but somehow, if anything is to happen, citizens are going to have to find out that they have to apply themselves to the Director of Public Prosecutions and go through his apparatus to get to the Commissioner of Elections. So they've put now 3 steps between citizens who have a concern about the way elections are unfolding and getting anything done about it. And the very reason why the Conservatives were allowed to take power in the first place is because the process of investigation of complaints happened so slowly.
Right.
Not because there wasn't sanctions against all the things that were done. The sanctions were all there. The remedies are spelled out. It's not that the Act lacked teeth. It's not that the Act didn't have enough reach. It's not that the Act and the entity, Elections Canada, didn't have a free hand. They did. It's just that the Act specified the process by which the investigation was to unfold in such a way that the unfolding of this investigation happened so slowly that by the time we got to solutions and remedies.
Right, and of course, justice delayed is justice denied.
Denied, exactly.
And not to mention, DPP is closely associated with the Prime Minister's office.
Of course.
Okay.
That is the track.
Okay, so what are some of the other things that people need to be concerned about in this Bill C-23? One of the things I've heard is that it may be taking us one step closer to having voting machines, which of course can be hacked, and that's a real great way to guarantee election results. But are we getting closer to that?
I can give you some background there. At the ACPP, we have talked on occasion, and in the early talk phases, about half the committee was split each way. Some people who said there's no such thing as internet security, forget internet voting. And some people who were in love with the idea of internet voting and thought it would make all things light and wonderful. Elections Canada decided to do the investigation and see whether or not internet voting would sort of live up to its advanced billing. What they found was it's much too expensive to contemplate, and there's no such thing as security. So the idea, as far as Elections Canada goes, as of 2012 and 2013, as of 2013, Elections Canada's view about internet voting or electronic voting machines, all that was full stop, no go, don't do it.
So that's both internet voting and voting machines,
Right.
electronic voting.
Right.
That it's just impossible to guarantee
security.
Security. of
Can't do it.
It's impossible.
And it's way too expensive to even attempt.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So, but what also follows on that is that the idea of internet access to the register of voters for electors who wanted to get onto the register, if people want to register as a voter, get their name on the list, that doing that electronically and through the internet is fine. And I agree. It's good. It would be a nice addition to have an electronically managed voters list, as long as there's appropriate backups.
Yeah.
Because it would make certain things happen. As elections unfolded, certain things would be much easier to manage for Elections Canada. So the idea of an electronic registration is fine. And that's actually what Bill C-23 contemplates. It actually contemplates electronic registration process.
Does it
Yes.
take us a step towards, despite what Elections Canada has found through its investigations, that electronic voting is a no-go, but does this overrule that in any way or help pave the way to some sort of electronic or hackable, fraudulent voting electronic systems in the future?
Well, the hackable, fraudulent stuff would all be with respect to an electronically managed list. But the list doesn't exist. You know, the criticality of the accuracy of the list is something that can be monitored over time. So the idea that on a specific day somebody would be able to hack in and manipulate the list in a way that would fraudulently skew the outcome of an election, I think that's a concern that can be managed, and the bill itself doesn't talk about electronic voting or electronic voting machines.
Okay, all right.
But you should not...
What's in the mind of the Conservative Party of Canada is a different matter. I can't tell you that. I can only tell you what I think they think.
But I am pretty sure it's inevitable that we will go toward the electronic or computerized voting at some time. Not necessarily within the next 5 or 10 years, but eventually we will be.
Well, as you know, as the technology unfolds, we don't know what we're going to see 10 years down the line. Yeah. But for now, the last time we talked about it at the ACPP, the language from Marc Morin and from his people was, this is off the table till at least 2020.
Maybe they'll be able to figure out some sort of predictive voting, where they'll be able to...
Actually, I can give you a cross comparison in Elections Ontario. They are doing some tests for last probably 2 or 3 by-elections, just here and there, doing some tests to see if it's feasible.
Well, I know in the municipal election...
Oh, yes, they do that.
They had that. I was a little shocked to see that. Okay, so let's really get down to the nitty-gritty about if this bill goes through and it's in second reading and they've got a majority, so chances are this is going to become the law, Bill C-23. Let's talk about what our democracy looks like in a post-Bill C-23 age.
We don't have a democracy.
We don't know.
It's over.
Over.
It's over.
Now, can you elaborate? Because that doesn't
Over
sound
is
very
over.
good.
It's like there's no
Game over.
It's done. There's no. The elections will all be a sham. The apparatus that Elections Canada has built up since 1873 to make sure that elections were free and fair will be neutered and put to bed, put to sleep. We'll just have a window dressing
Of election.
entity. Elections Canada will exist in name, and people who find it advantageous will be able to promote the idea that we have a federal institution whose job it is to run fair elections. But fair elections won't be possible. That'll be over. If Bill C-23 passes as it's being read now, there's no such thing as a fair election in Canada. That's over. We're kind of already there, actually. In 2006, we were already there, but this will put the nail in the coffins.
But people will still be able to vote. If people vote en masse for a different party,
And there is a big if.
won't that be a fair election?
No.
Won't people continue to choose their governments through the voting process?
Well, you could say that, and in a certain hollow kind of a way, it's true. It implies if people make a choice at the ballot booth, it implies they know something about what's at stake and what's going on, and who the players are and what there's in their heads and what the agenda is. But that's not possible under this iteration of the Act, and it became, since 2006 when the Conservatives took power, they steadily have moved the Act in that direction so that it's less likely that people will make an informed choice.
Is that because there's going to be less control over the monies that are available to spend on TV advertising by the parties? Is that and if that's what are the reasons for that?
Well, one of the reasons is that there's a mechanism now essentially to spy on voters. The unique identifier number. In 1997, Elections Canada established a regime internally to help it keep a more accurate list, and it assigned every Canadian voter an ID number, a unique stable identifier number. And 2007, that became external. It became attached to the voters list and supplied to political parties. So you can create databases that facilitate micro-targeting so that you could send, for instance, if there's 3 voters in your household, if I do effective advanced polling, if I hire a Lockheed Martin or whoever the contractor is, I decide to do that polling and I do accurate advanced polling, I can send 3 different envelopes to your house, and each one will outline a different policy agenda based on what I know about what you think. And I know it's going to go to the right people because I have the unique identifier number. I don't have to worry that I've misidentified somebody in a list and I've just dropped a bomb in my own backyard, right? I can know precisely what people want to hear.
Okay, and what else?
Then you have the bingo card scheme, which tells political parties that want to know exactly who has voted and when. And the unique identifier number is part of that regime as well. So on voting day, political parties can have already identified constituencies where the votes are going to be close. And this act actually extends the bingo card scheme to advance polls. And this act also makes another day of advance polling. And the trend is to move more and more to advance polling. We're seeing a greater amount of the participation showing up at advance polling. So if you're a political party and you're cynical and you want to win, you get all your guys to the advance polls, you check and you make sure that you got them to the advance polls, and the rest of the population is out there, you launch the robocalls to misdirect everybody else away from the polls, and that way you win. And when the election commissioner gets involved and the investigation unfolds, it takes 4 years. So by that time you've claimed power and everybody's moved on.
So is that because the robocalls were such a big
That's why the robocalls are such a big deal, because that's what happened. It happened all across Canada, not just in 7 ridings. Complaints came in about robocalls all across Canada, and an extraordinary number of robocalls happened in Canada, and an extraordinary number of constituencies were won and lost by a few votes, as many as 6 or 7.
Right, and it just takes a couple ridings to make a difference.
And I want to clarify something. Although these bingo cards are available to all parties, you have to understand only 3 or 4 parties have the amenities available to them to use that
information.
For that information. Independent candidates, fringe parties, they don't have the
You just don't have the resources
they don't have
make
resources, they don't have human power, nothing that they can do that.
So does this bill here, even despite the outrage of the robocalls in the last election, does this bill enshrine the ability of parties to use those kind of dirty tricks?
No, it doesn't. That happened in 2007 when the bingo card scheme was introduced. And, the Liberals were silent, the NDP was silent, even the Green Party was silent. and the Conservatives in the Bloc colluded together to bring the scheme into existence. So it's not new. They're just enlarging it and making it more effective. So, you know, when there's honorable intent, there's nothing wrong with robocalls. You can phone people up, tell them who your candidate is, you know, who their candidate is, what the candidate's running on as a platform, what the party runs. All those messages are fine. You can do that. What the problem is when you have people of ill intent who have no intention of doing anything honorable. They just want to win. They send out messages that frustrate people, send them to the wrong places. Essentially, they manipulate people into giving up their vote. It's a voter suppression scheme. It's a voter suppression tool. The bingo card is a voter suppression tool. The rationale advance is that it helps get out the vote. Well,
not really.
Not really, but...
So why do you think this is happening? And this is kind of a big, broad question, and I know, you know, we talk about if people have honorable intentions, and it seems that by and large in the entire history of Canada, people have had pretty good intentions, that the parties have respected the democratic process. I mean, even René Lévesque in 76.
There have been players, all along there have been players both ways. John A. Macdonald was not opposed at all to rigging elections, and he did. We know that. You study the history there, you know that. And where it has been, predominantly it's been a conservative phenomenon, although the Liberals have been caught at it too. You know, there's been the bulk of the players are honorably intentioned and want to do the right thing, and then there's some players on the side who just want to win because they want the power and the money. And the Elections Act has evolved to try and cut off, you know, historically the Elections Act has evolved to try and cut off the opportunities for people to cheat.
Even though the Election Act has been put there by the governing parties over the course of Confederation, right?
Right.
Well, it's a competition. If you have left and right, nobody wants to let the other party to win. So having Election Act or elections in Canada help either party to have some sort of the so-called pseudo control over the other party's movement.
Well, you know, if you go
or
back,
at least it was the original thought, I mean.
And you know, sometimes as an elected party, you have to throw a bone once in a while, you know, if you want what you want. And so, you know, as law evolves, it's not perfect. I mean, who has a Bismarck, right? Otto von Bismarck said there's two things that most people will be much happier not knowing anything about the making of them. One is sausage, and the other is law. Because it's a messy process. But over time, the Elections Act has mostly evolved for the better. You know, when I first got involved in politics, it cost $1,000 as a deposit, and you didn't get it back unless you got a certain number of votes. And over the time that I was involved in politics, we went from that to where you get all your deposit now. If you do your paperwork right, you get your deposit back. And we had a regime in 2003 where public subsidy for political parties. Hooray, because political parties are going to starve to death on the money that people are willing to donate. They just don't. Right? They want the benefits of organized political system, but they don't want to fund them. Something to do with human nature. So political parties are subsidized. You know, and one of the things, the language that Harper uses about eliminating the public subsidy, he says it like this: he doesn't think that Canadians should have to support parties they don't support. Well, he certainly should know that that statement is false. Political parties and candidates get their expenses returned to them at the end of elections campaign if they stay within the rules. So, you know, if the Conservative Party of Canada comes to power, or the Liberal Party or somebody else comes to power, and they have $80 million worth of expenses that they spent in the election, if they do all their paperwork right, they get $40 million of that back from the public purse. So no matter whether or not there's a public subsidy directly to political parties are still subsidized from the public purse. That happens. So for Harper to suggest that the reason he's eliminating the public subsidies directly to political parties is that he thinks that Canadians shouldn't have to support political parties they don't support is just disingenuous. It's false. If he doesn't know that isn't true, he should know that isn't true. And I don't believe he doesn't know that it isn't true. I believe he's misleading people.
Shouldn't democracy be tax-free?
Everything should be tax-free, Bob.
If you want a civilized society, you're going to have to pay taxes. That's just as the simple
No, I'm
truth,
specifically being facetious about the name democracy that they throw it out.
But,
so go ahead. We don't have a lot of time.
Yeah, I know.
Will.
It's a big,
I mean,
it's a big thick book.
And you had to come into town today from beautiful
Lake Erie.
southwestern Ontario.
Yeah.
Lake Erie, my favorite of the Great Lakes. But so here we are, and you're saying, the Elections Act has evolved to basically protect Canadian
electoral
democracy,
process, yeah.
and you're saying this bill, Bill C-23, which is probably going to pass, is the end of Canadian democracy.
Yeah, it is.
So it's really that bad.
It's really that bad.
So having said that, then what, if anything, can Canadians do about it? Or should we just pack it in?
As long as we still have the ballot, there's a chance we can get it back. But people have to use the ballot intelligently. They have to actually be informed about what's going on, which is why I'm here, to try and get people to understand that there is a rule book. It's very thick. The Conservatives systematically and knowingly break the rules, knowing they won't get caught because investigations unfold so slowly. But that doesn't mean you have to vote for them. What you need to know about the Conservative Party of Canada is it is a serial cheater. They rig elections. That's how they're in power. You can't vote for those guys if you want democracy. The party, in fact, the 2007 iteration of the Act, brought in by the Conservatives, by the way, says that if a political party is caught doing what the Conservatives did in 2006, it would be deregistered.
Which they didn't.
Their law, the law they brought in as an Elections Act, as a specified remedy for the offense of the In-N-Out scandal, was to deregister the party.
So that means that they should be deregistered.
Of course they should, if they want to obey their own laws.
What can we do to help get them deregistered?
You said this party from the beginning was cheating. Even at the time that the Reform Party of Canada came with the original Progressive Conservative Party of Canada, and then they said, "Oh, we are getting together and we do this," and then cheated the original party and just.
Oh yeah.
And they have a case actually. The gentleman who was running in Toronto Centre, who was in this show a few months back, Dorian Baxter, was from the Progressive Canadian Party. Mm-hmm. Still, they have the case in the court with the lawyers, with these people who kept their money.
Let me try and go just a little bit farther though, about, because your question is such a good one, but the answer is pretty broad. In my opinion is that these things, these manipulations of the Elections Act, are not the only front on which the Conservative Party of Canada is attacking Canadian democracy. There are many fronts on which they are attacking Canadian democracy. One of the ways they're attacking is to scandalize and delegitimize the Senate, because they want to get rid of it. They don't want a sober, second thought House.
Right.
They don't want that.
Yeah.
The vitriol and the hostility of the tactics in the House of Commons when debate happens is to delegitimize the House of Commons in the minds of Canadians. The attack on Elections Canada is to delegitimize that institution in the minds of Canadians.
And make Canadians cynical about the whole process.
Exactly. The scandal at the Supreme Court about who Harper wants to appoint to the Supreme Court. Guy's clearly not qualified, but Harper nevertheless wants to appoint him. So Harper's his appointed guy to William Elliott to the RCMP. Disaster, right? Disaster. So there isn't anywhere you can look in the Canadian political landscape where you don't see the Conservatives on the attack against a Canadian democratic institution. They mean to delegitimize all these institutions in the eyes of Canadians so that Canadians walk away and no longer defend those institutions. When that happens, the Conservatives will rule forever.
Do you think that? Sorry, Bob. Do you think that's their what's their ultimate
I think
goal?
that's the strategy. Make sure that the Canadian polity, civil society, simply walks away from its democratic institutions in disgust and defeat. Then those institutions get to exist, technically, but they're adrift in the Canadian polity's mind. They just don't mean democracy in the mind of Canadians, right?
Because people have walked away from the
Because people have
process.
walked away in disgust, in contempt, in all that stuff. So what Canadians can do is refuse to give up on their democratic institutions. Refuse to give up. Just don't get sucked into the idea that we need to abolish the Senate. We need a Senate, by the way. The Prime Minister shouldn't appoint senators, something Harper again said he would never do, right? He's appointed 30-something.
Yes.
Well, you know what gets me is that according to their own legislation, the party should be deregistered.
Yes.
And I think that if Canadians get that message, that we need to push that and hang them by their own petard.
Well, I want to not only agree with Will, but also I go one step further. These are only things on the surface. Gradually, they are abdicating the complete sovereignty of Canada.
Oh, for sure.
You see, suppressing voters is one thing, but selling Canada is another thing.
Well, sure.
I mean, I can handle to have a Liberals or NDP or Conservative in the House of Commons or even in the Senate. But when I see they are signing bills after bills to abdicate sovereignty mainly to United States government and the institutions that are part of the United States, like recently with the IGA agreement, then you find out, hey, there is illegitimate government, illegitimate voting, and illegitimate contract and agreement without consulting with public.
Yeah. So I really think, that the view of the Conservative Party of Canada is that the nation is simply a storefront, and that the public institutions of the nation are their job is to stand guard in the streets, while the conservative apparatchiks and their friends do smash and grabs all over the country for whatever the country's worth. Right? They think it seems
they are auctioneers of the.
Well, it seems like it seems like they think the nation is just a storefront, and that they should have their own policemen standing in the streets, making sure they get a chance to take whatever they want. It's, as Bauman is exactly right. The farther you look, the deeper you look, the worse it gets. I mean, it's truly frightening.
Okay, so here we are. We're out of time now, but I mean, what can we do? Is there any action we can suggest that people take?
Get informed. Go to Elections Canada's website. Look at how detailed the process is by which candidates legitimately get elected. Figure out how stuff works. Talk to your MPs. Go to the constituency office. Figure out, the paper trail, how laws get made. I mean, you'll find it is enormously frustrating to track legislation because it keeps changing names. I mean, this was one of the things that we found out in the Somalia inquiry. It was one of the ways that you keep information secret, even though you have an Office of Public Information, and access to information law, is you keep changing the names of the documents so that as people come in to specify the name of a document they want to read so they have some idea what's going on in the country, that document no longer has that name because there's a schedule that week by week that document changes names.
Okay.
Stuff like that. I mean, there's a show for you. Do that show.
Okay, we'll do that show. Okay, Will, do you want to give any contact information for yourself if people want to get in touch with you? I really do think we need to start a movement to deregister the
Conservative
Reform.
Party of Canada?
I mean the Conservative Party, because they're not the same conservatives that we used to have in this country.
Not anything
they are
like
not
them.
conservatives at all.
This is a new party, the Reform Party, and they're trashing the country.
They are not even Reform Party.
Is there any contact info that you'd like to give out, Will? Or?
Anybody who wants me can call me. I communicate by cell phone, and it's always on. I'm happy to talk to anybody who's concerned about what's going on in the country. That number is 519-852-8279.
And we'll put up the Elections Canada website right after this. Do you know what it is off the top of your head?
Elections.ca.
Yeah, Elections Canada.
Elections Canada.
No, elections. Just elections.ca.
Either way, we'll get there.
Elections.ca.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so there you go. So people can check that out and,
Elections.ca.
as you say, get informed.
Yeah.
Will, thanks for coming on the show today and
Thank you, Will.
at least beginning
Really.
this conversation.
Yeah, it's a lot of ground to cover. I really thank you for the
I can't
opportunity
get
to do
tired
this.
of hearing from you.
Okay. Oops. Thank you. You too. We're going to actually got another little video to kind of punctuate this discussion right now. It's the mechanisms of election fraud in Canada. This is about 7 minutes long, and we're going to come back with Tim Martin and talk about
Is it
permaculture
tutorial?
right after this.
Is it
I
tutorial?
don't know, but it's on the show, so you can watch it. Okay, we'll be.
All right. My name is Will Arlo. I'm a member of the Canadian Action Party, have been since that party's inception in 1997, and I've run in 7 federal electoral events as a candidate. I'm a member of the Advisory Committee of Political Parties, which is a liaison group between Elections Canada and the registered political parties in Canada. that meets from time to time, at least once a year, and sometimes more, or frequently more, to deal with specific problems that arise out of the administration of the Act. And the purpose of this document is to help to inform Canadians about what's been going on in Canada with respect to electoral fraud, as opposed to voter fraud. Voter fraud happens from time to time when electors who are ineligible wind up casting a ballot or attempt to. It's never been shown to affect an outcome. Electoral fraud, however, is quite different and has affected outcomes since 2006. So the indictment here is not of Elections Canada. It's a fine organization peopled with committed staff who faithfully administer their public service oaths. Elections Canada does what it does because it has to. It's mandated by law to do that. The indictment here is of the Conservative Party of Canada. It is the entity that has manipulated the Act to favor itself and disfavor everyone else and democracy in Canada. It does that. One of the principal ways it has done that lately is with Bill C-31, which was an act to amend the Elections Act. And it did two really important things. One of the things it did was externalize and attach to the voters list that is supplied to political parties a unique permanent identifier number that Elections Canada had previously used to help it maintain an accurate list. The other thing it did was initiate the bingo card scheme. A bingo card is a slang term for a report that comes out every half hour from polling places on elections day to political parties that are eligible to receive one and who want one, that identifies precisely who has voted and when. So the mechanism there then is when political parties do sophisticated advanced polling and they've identified constituencies where the votes are going to be close, they can then use the bingo card and their organization abilities to make sure they get their vote to the polls first, and they can check to see whether or not their vote has gotten to the polls. And when the computer analysis says they have, the required number of their camp has gotten to the polls, the robocalls start. The robocalls misdirect other voters away from the polls. So the purpose of the bingo card, or the rationale for the bingo card, is to help get out the vote. The actual reason for the bingo card is that it helps political parties that want to and have a shot at power. It helps them suppress the votes. It helps them win. It doesn't do anything for democracy. In fact, it's a uniquely and distinctly hostile program. The other thing that C-31 did is what I mentioned before. It externalizes the unique identifier number that Elections Canada had previously used to identify voters and keep an accurate list, because turnover is such a significant problem in maintaining an accurate list. That number is attached to each voter in Canada, and it's stable. So it facilitates the construction of databases that enable micro-targeting. Micro-targeting is a technique that has been adopted by the Conservatives in a big way. It came out of the United States, most notably. The Republican Party was the first to really win at micro-targeting in a big way. And it was interesting because they didn't win against their opponents. They used it against themselves and each other in the nomination race between John McCain and George Bush, and it was very ugly. But the effect here in Canada now of Bill C-31 and the externalization of the unique identifier number and the application of the bingo card scheme was to steal an election. The election in 2011 was a fraud. It was made possible, that fraud was made possible by the externalization of the unique identifier number and by the bingo card scheme. So it's impossible to overstate the extent to which this has damaged democracy in Canada. And I think that if most Canadian voters understood that Elections Canada is mandated by law to hand over information from the voters list to political parties that can be used to create all kinds of sophisticated databases that effectively spies on voters and can be effectively used to suppress voters from the polling place, I think most Canadians would be shocked and appalled, and they should be. It's not. The bingo card and the externalization of the unique identifier number are not democratic impulses. They are distinctly anti-democratic impulses. And it's interesting that the initiative for the bingo card scheme actually came from a meeting of the minds between the Conservative Party of Canada and the Bloc, a parties who had avowed purposes to break up Canada. It's a very interesting observation.
We're back here on the show, and we've got Scott Snidgens joining us here. Scott, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's nice to have my name pronounced correctly.
Well, I couldn't sound it out. I had to go through a mental process.
Very nice.
So, now what are we talking about today? We're talking about urban farming, right?
Yes.
Which is a great idea. Let's get right into it.
Yeah. I mean, to start, I guess I do urban farming through a company, Truly Local, and I go around to people's homes, do on-site consultations, and help them find a way to really turn their home into an urban homestead. These are usually 5-year processes, just getting rid of your lawns, doing raised beds, doing aquaponics, hydroponics, roofs, vertical. Doesn't really matter, but yeah.
That's really good. I mean, because I saw a story on the internet a couple years ago about some guys I think they were in Kelowna, where they were just going around to people's houses and saying, look, we'll turn your front and backyard into a food growing operation here. And they worked for a percentage of the return, whatever it was.
Yeah, there's a lot of, it's kind of a global movement that is really happening. Through the internet, you can just see all the great stuff going in Australia and Africa. And
I think it's giving us so much hope. You know, I come from a small town on the West Coast. I went to visit a friend in the city. I sat down at his table. I had this beautiful meal. And then he said, I grew the salad. I grew the herbs here. And I said, what? Then he opened up his closet in his house in the middle of the city. And there he had little seedlings growing. Took me to his back porch. He had worms producing compost for him.
Worm castings. Yes.
And his little teeny tiny patio was covered in plants.
It's, we don't use our resources that we currently have. So the hope, it's just we can grow from where we're at. And we are growing vertically, so we can use our space more efficiently to live off of it. So,
and how much money do you think this is going to save people? Because we know that our organic vegetables and fruits are, we're happy to spend the extra money, but it costs more.
Well, there's so many, benefits I find from growing food. If just simple cost, yes, you're eating local, you're eating what you grow. There's the mental and therapeutic benefits from.
You can make up the word therapeutical. That's fine.
All right.
Sheena made
it's
up
gonna go on Wiki
words earlier.
So people can save quite a lot, and you don't need to get into the cost of labeling your food organic. You know what you put into it. If you would like to spray it with whatever you want, you have these choices. But again, you're lowering your global footprint. You're eating within a 5-foot radius, or however far you walk to your garden. So it does. It helps all around, not just the wallet.
Now, are you from Toronto originally?
Yes, born and raised.
In the city?
Yes.
So I'm just curious, what was it that got you really passionate about this subject?
I think it's just been an evolution of myself. I've been vegan for 5.5 years. Started just, I think, bacon and ribs were on sale at the Metro, the local supermarket. So I had about 3 days of that for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And it was starting to go bad in my fridge. And I was like, what's going on? Like, what is this? Like, I know it's rotting there, and I just ate that. So that's probably rotting in my stomach. And I was like, I don't know anything where this food comes from, anything about food. So it was a journey to understand food and our processes. And, you know, you heard stories and you understood this and that. So I was like, okay, I'm going to be vegetarian. Tried that for a month. And I'm like, no, I'm going to go all out vegan. Yeah. And so from there, it's just been a learning curve from just understanding the whole process.
I think it's totally exciting, okay, because here we are in the studios and offices of that channel. And when I talked to you yesterday, you were able to come in here and just look at the simple windows that we have inside an office building and tell me how we can be growing food.
Yeah.
So I also think that, you know, for everyday people who want to eat better, and like you say, they want to have that, but you can also create a green, edible environment in a workplace.
I mean, you have a beautiful window here, doing your sprouts and very access. So, I mean, I love sprouts. You have your 2 to 10 day turnaround. They're superfoods.
Can you tell us about pea sprouts and how
the ones that are living over there?
I just want people to know
we're self-sufficient in pea sprouts.
Yeah,
That's good.
that channel is working towards self-sufficiency, and
yes.
you have helped us because you just took a whole bunch of pea seeds. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Just like
peas, right?
You put them in a tray.
Peas in the pod, yeah.
and then.
Well, I mean,
with soil or without soil, or
we start soaking our seeds. I mean, wheatgrass, pea shoots, sunflower. I mean, there's quite a long list of sprouts and microgreens that you can grow. So with pea shoots or peas seeds, you soak them, and then we do that for roughly 3 days. Introduce them to a tray, put the weight on them until they grow to a certain height. Then we introduce them to light, and just around a 10 to 13 day turnaround. So,
wow.
Yeah. So what was it? The Seeding Eden event that happened in this location. So I had an abundance of trays because only a little bit of seeds can do a whole tray. So I just brought them here, and yeah.
Well, thank you for feeding us a little bit.
My pleasure, and that's what it's really about. It's feeding people living things. It's about, I don't know why we go to grocery stores and buy dying plants when we actually have the ability to eat living things.
Yeah.
Well, I'm interested in, because we're living in the city, and Toronto, probably more than any other North American city from my experience, has small lots, right? Small lots, and then of course now high-rises, nothing but condos. I mean, it's hard to afford an actual home in the city anymore. Is it possible for us to approach or to get kind of high density growth, high production out of very low square footages and even apartments?
Yes and no. I think
I think I can. In a term, like grow up.
Well, your friend had to grow up, and
not grow up. I mean, that's a whole other.
Your friend had to grow up.
Well,
my friend with the grow up
was growing. Oh well, oops. Anyways, but they were growing food, and not to beat around the bush on that topic.
No pun intended.
Prohibition has allowed us to grow food, understand the ability to grow things anywhere, in a very efficient. Hands-off approach.
Yeah. Well, one thing I have heard about though is growing up. So he's talking about small spaces and rooftops, and apparently I saw some on Facebook. I saw that some really cool teepee things. They were just like sticks made into teepees, and then all the plants are growing up and inside of it. Mm-hmm. So that would do something in a really small space, right?
Yes. I mean, I've done. I mean, if just 1 foot off the wall, I was able to do 100 grow sites hydroponically in a person's apartment, and then I used their south-facing window to grow more of their fruiting vegetables. Mm-hmm. So, to answer your question, you can grow a lot and all that you need in a small space, but I realized not everyone can. Mm-hmm. So actually, where I'm at in the stage of my company's development is bringing in live plants into people's homes and kind of replacing the fridge. Because even though you have a tiny little spot, a square 2 foot by 2 foot where you can grow in, if you drive out of the city, we have massive amounts of farmland. So if we can work with local farmers and get them to supply our micro farms with fully ready to harvest plants, then now we're looking into the kind of the growth of getting people sufficient food sustainability.
But I think it's really interesting that you're doing this as a business, because sometimes I think you need that kind of singleness of vision and even the profit motive to make something real. In other words, make something real, like you're offering a product or a service to people. You purchase the product or service, and then you will be self-sufficient in food, you know?
Yes, I agree. I think especially the urban farming movement, it's a very volunteer permaculture based, which is great. But if it is the future, it should be an industry. There should be sustainability. People should be able to live healthy and happily, providing people good local food.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying, because I hear a lot of good ideas all the time. You know, we've got a whole bunch of books behind us that are giving us all the information. We're in the information age, and I'm just really happy to see that you've taken that information and you've made yourself a small business out of it. And, you know, I hope it goes great places.
So, yeah, and to that end, with Truly Local, Scott, like who are the people, who are your customers? Like, who watching this now should consider getting in touch with you, and then we can talk about what they can get by doing that.
Really, I think people who eat are currently my target customers in a way, but to narrow it down, people who just want more engagement and involvement within their food. You have a sunny window, and you're like, oh, I can support my herb garden. Anyone who's even growing herbs, grew food before.
Anybody who eats organic.
Organic,
they're going to save money, right?
But even saving money, because now, I mean, the biggest problem that's in our current agriculture industry is something that the farmers call shrinkage. People call it waste. It's not the Seinfeld.
Yes, I was thinking of the other kind of
most
shrinkage.
People seem to bring up.
Close that window. There's a cold breeze coming in.
I know, and then your plants just shrivel up and die. So with that taken, I mean, our current way we purchase food is the push industry. This is really a term that comes around in business, that a lot of things becoming pull. When you mentioned Facebook, it's not, people are starting to pull the information they want.
Yeah, the whole internet's pull.
Pull, but you still go to the supermarket and they're pushing this produce onto you. So by being able to turn it around and say, okay, I'm going to order this seed, I'm going to order this plant from that farmer. These farmers are coming to me loving this idea, because now they're actually going to grow knowing that that plant's already sold and has a home. And I'm taking it from, instead of they're going to harvest it in 45 days, I'm going to take it at 30 days, bring it into someone's home, and then have it live another 40 days in someone's system.
That's a really cool concept. Actually, I've never heard that concept before, because you're providing living food for people.
Living food.
You're getting the cash to the farmer quicker. You're giving him a better return for the dollar.
He's peace of mind knowing that seed hits the ground bought.
Yeah.
So he knows that, or she.
And our farmers need more sub-economies in terms of what they're doing. Not to mention, we have a lot, like the whole movement to have us eating better has led to a lot of organic farmers trying to follow a whole bunch of laws that they probably shouldn't have to follow, because there are no laws that say you have to label when you've got pesticides, but they have to label when they've got it organic. And you're giving them a whole other subsidiary to their business.
Well, you actually don't have to. You can label yourself and label your food organic and sell it in Ontario. There is no regulation. I don't even like using the word organic. I don't really care what word you want to use. You want to know. You want to know what your food is? We're gonna get on a bus. We're gonna go to these farms that you order it from. You can see their full throughputs, and go back home and be like, I don't have to worry about that, because I know Joe and Pauline Slager I get my food from them. I know their throughputs.
Yeah.
We're not labeling their food. The extra cost isn't on the little farmer. I'm pulling from that farm.
Nice.
So that's one thing for people can get in touch with you, and you can bring them living plants that are going to provide them with food.
People, yes.
What else?
So I mean, yeah, the customers right now are, we do free on-site consultations. It's still a young industry. I've been going through the internet, aggregating anything that is a plug-and-grow system.
Yeah.
So I'll come to your place, look around, like here, these are sunny windows. You actually don't need, you have a system. It's called nature. But if you want it in your kitchen, there's these towers, there's the urban cultivator. You know, you can get an $8,000 unit that grows automatically everything you need.
Is it like that thing? I saw
On Dragon's
a
Den?
picture. No, actually, I saw again on Facebook, but it was an airport somewhere in Europe.
That's the tower gardens. But this is what I go to people's homes saying, you have a great place for a tower garden. You have for your zip gardens here from.
Can you just tell
See,
people?
we don't.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, you know, for people that don't know what this stuff is, and I still would need to see pictures, but you can walk in, you know about this stuff. And you can say, this is good for that, that's good for this. So people that want to grow food but might not really know how can give you a call, and you can optimize their situation.
I work, you know, when you try and do a maze, you're like, oh, I can't. But if you go backwards, it's actually a lot easier for some reason.
Right.
Well, people want to grow food.
Yeah.
Well, how about I give you the grown food, and then you can start working backwards to the seed.
Yeah.
Nice.
So for people who want to dive into urban farming, this allows them to have kind of a pain-free approach. And a lot of people, when I plant them seeds, if they forget about it or you grow some basil, you don't want to harvest it because then all your plant's gone, or you forgot about to water your tomato for the week and you went away. You come back and it's dead. This whole momentum and everything for people growing food stops. So if I can be like, no, you can harvest that full basil, and I'll replace it with a completely ready to harvest plant next month.
Perfect.
And then if you
Brilliant.
And if you want that every month, now you know, and you can interact with your food, harvest freely, experiment, and I mean even doing aquaponics. I'm bringing in living fish that can be harvested.
What kind of fish do you use?
Tilapia is your go-to in aquaponics right now, but I'm getting to catfish.
How big of a tank do you need to raise tilapia?
Tilapia is kind of awesome because of why it's your go-to in aquaponics is the amount of space it needs to grow, its ratio to, plants. Just how many tilapia you can get in a tank, and their life, they just like sit there and chill out. So it really depends. That's a hard question.
How big?
But in a small little container, you can get like 5-6 tilapia in there. Yeah, and living comfortably.
And how big do they get?
1 to 2 pounds, and they grow 6 to 8 months.
Nice.
The male tilapias.
Those are big ones.
Another reason why they're the go-to in aquaponics is they're a quick turnaround.
So after you're finished growing food from their poo, do you just eat them?
All fertilizer is poo, basically.
But you don't eat their poo.
No.
No, the plants do.
Yeah. The fish poo feeds the plant.
It's a what do you call that? Symbiotic.
A symbiotic relationship. Yes, I use that in my aquaponics course when I teach it.
So what's a minimum tank size for tilapia?
Look online. People will grab anything that can. Number 2, plastics. It doesn't. They like cramped, small spaces, so you can.
Weird.
You can do kind of anything. You have a fish tank at home, just throwing some tilapia in there.
Okay. So can we get in touch with you to get some tilapia?
Yeah, that's where I look at my business model and the revenue. Is I was doing these custom installs, and they're a one-time fee, and the feedback is okay. They're growing from seed. They don't have a big enough space to grow a full harvest, and so now I'm like, oh, okay. Well, let me just go around to all these farms, get all these living plants, and then let's me bring them into these people's homes with systems.
Yeah.
So now I am going to broker with all the farms, your tilapia or catfish, eventually your lobsters and everything else, your living plants.
Will you end up in the fish sauce business at the end of all of this?
Of course, you're going to have to,
do something with your leftover fish.
Yeah.
Fish sauce, you can put some cock sauce on there. It's up to you. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter. You're really trying to make a nice, delicious dish,
I
right?
think that to me is actually a delicious dish. Obviously, I'm not a vegan.
Well, I'm vegan until I grow my own fish and my chickens and everything else.
Quick question before we'll give all
You
your contact
deteriorate
info.
further.
Yes, which is okay, but maybe not today. I want to have a whole show that just does nothing but deteriorate. But what about flat roofs in the city? Like, what do should people put greenhouses on there? Should they just grow stuff in the summer? What should they do?
I mean, I just saw a home, and we're gonna put a pergola up. She has enough space to actually do her leafy greens off her kitchen, but she has a flat roof, and she has a bar up there, but they don't really use it. So I'm gonna turn it into more of an urban homestead area. Just grow food up there, so they're gonna have their cucumbers, tomatoes. And then I'm going to build a doghouse that looks a lot like a chicken coop.
For the chickens?
For the whatever. Currently, there's no bylaw, I think, for rooftop chickens.
Oh, really? You can have chickens on your rooftop?
I know you can't do backyard chickens, but I haven't read anything about rooftop chickens.
We can do chickens in Vancouver now.
I want chickens in Toronto.
And personally, like, if you can bring in the eggs and allow that into our city, not sure why we can't have chickens.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I want chickens.
Yeah. I mean, 5 chickens, 800 eggs.
Yeah, my
year?
grandmother
One
used to
season.
raise pigeons, and he wanted us to eat them, but we weren't that excited about it.
A friend of mine ate a robin's egg once.
Yeah. Quail eggs.
Yeah.
Yummy.
They're small, but blue.
Well, one thing I wanted to mention before is for the people trying to get into it who don't know how, I'm now working with chefs and nutritionists to build menus that people order living plants. So you can get like a 3-month cleanse, whatever, from this nutritionist. She'll design it. And then from there, you're going to have your herbs come, and they'll sustain the whole time. You'll have your weekly deliveries. But now, as a normal consumer, out of the 32,000 edible plants out there, they're just going to be like, I'm going to get that cleanse, or I'm going to get that tasty delight. And then and then we just package it up, ship it out to them, and they're harvesting, cooking, they're doing their normal thing, but the amount of knowledge and learning curve cuts down drastically.
Wow. Okay. Well, Scott, this has been great to find out about all this. Now, what's the website if people want to get and stay in touch?
Website is trulylocal.ca. On Facebook is Truly Local Farms, and Twitter and all that sort of fun stuff out there. So, I mean, you can email us at info@trulylocal.ca for general questions. My email is scott@trulylocal.ca. And yeah, if you just give us an email, our website's under development, but we'll have a farm intake form up there. Fill out that general information. You'll get your own personal farmer to come to your home, do an on-site assessment, come back with a 5-year farm plan on how to turn your land or your condo or whatever you want into an urban homestead, and then keep on giving you living plants.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks for coming in today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
It was lovely.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to come back with Tim Martin right after this to talk about permaculture, kind of related for sure to this topic. But in the meantime, I have another video. I have a video about the RFID chips.
Are they salt and vinegar or barbecue?
It depends how much fish sauce you put on them.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm getting hungry.
All
The
right,
show's
I
making
bet
me
you
hungry.
are. Okay, we'll be right back.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Hello everybody, hope this finds you well. I was asked a question after I made a comment on a French channel. The name of the man is Toltec, is his handle. Good man, good family man, much respect to you, Toltec. His video was about chemtrails and HARP. I'll put the link to the video. I guess the info thingy down there. I said do not take the chip in the video, in my response comment. He then asked me if I would make a video explaining just how we're to avoid taking the chip. Okay. Not taking the chip's going to be the easy part. Just refuse to take the chip. Unless you're in prison, crippled up in a hospital, or some old person that can't get around and defend themselves in a rest home, they're not going to go door to door forcing you to take the chip. In fact, I don't think there's any intent to force anyone to take the chip. It is mandatory, and it is in the health care bill. If you don't believe me, go up to your search bar up here and type in RFID in health care bill. It's in there. Don't take my word for it. Do your own research. It's there. The problem isn't in not taking the chip. It's easy to simply refuse to take the chip. There are many people who will not be chipped. You will not be alone. Do not be afraid. The problem comes when the chip is fully implemented. You will no longer be able to get health care through the medical services if you're not chipped. You will not be able to buy and sell things once we live in a cashless society. You will not be able to work in a legitimate job because they will not be able to automatically withdraw withholding taxes and register your pay to your chip. Therein lies the dilemma. There are ways around this. I will not go into that because I do not want to give away the plans to defeat the chip. Until then, the chip will not be implemented until 2014. We still have time to defeat this bill and to have it repealed. We still have time to vote out all those fools in Congress that thought they were doing the right thing by enslaving us. We are not cattle to be marked and branded. We are human beings. No one, I repeat, no one or government has the right to place anything in your body you do not want there. It's not only unconstitutional, it is inhuman. You want to get chipped, you be my guest, you go right on ahead. Remember, they'll then control every aspect of your life, every single aspect of it. They decide you're not playing ball with them, you're not playing along with the rules that they establish, which are mostly going to be unconstitutional. They'll just simply shut your chip off and you'll starve to death. Or die from lack of medical treatment. There's another problem with the chip. You've heard of nanite technology. If you haven't, look it up. Nanite technology. That could have something to do with the chemtrails and HARP as well. We could be breathing them in right now and not know it. You could put millions of them on a head of a pin. They could be finding their way to where they're programmed to find their way, into your brains and nervous systems. But they won't do anything yet. They'll just sit there innate They're waiting for the master chip to be switched on. Talking about your ultimate mind control. Don't take my word for anything. Do your own research on it. You'll find the technology is quite more advanced than what you might believe.
Okay, we're back on the show.
Hey,
what?
everybody.
What did you say there? No,
I
we'll
was
have to talk
talking
about that
about-
after the
yeah,
show.
right.
Okay, because we're talking about. Well, we've got Tim Martin here joining us, and Tim. So, what? Okay, what did you just say about the television being a mind control device?
Well, if television is it's a very passive medium for information. So we sit and we passively absorb the information, and we don't have a lot of feedback with our learning process ultimately. And so it's part of this consumer imprint that we have from very young for just receiving and not being productive, being a consumer of our media and of our food, but not being a productive part of those processes. And it starts very early in our lives. We become imprinted with this idea that we should be the recipient for culture, for society, for technology, for industry. Consumerism, yes. And so like the heart and soul of permaculture, I feel, is this responsibility for sustainability. And so being consumerist imprinted, we don't have a conception of this responsibility or sustainability. It's very, very hard to decondition ourselves from the consumerist mentality and into a productive producer mentality.
See, I wonder if that's changing now, though, with the internet, and because the internet,
It's much more
which is like TV, because they're on the screen and it can have video and stuff like that, but the internet is programmed by the user, not by some programmer somewhere, and also it demands interactivity. That's an essential component of.
Absolutely right, and we're seeing more grassroots, a return to grassroots movement as a result of that, and it's good news because we're able to get together and discuss these things, and there's also its drawbacks too. I mean, the YouTube video we were just watching was a little bit inflammatory, a little bit anxiety producing, this idea that these masters are trying to control our lives and our minds. It's kind of disempowering, and it produces a level of anxiety. I think it equatable with the GMOs in our diet, right? It's anxiety. It increases cortisol levels and does damage to the physical body.
The thing is that I want to say two things. One, it's interesting that permaculture and media are having something to do with each other. But, that's what we do at that channel, is we give people an opportunity, and like you and other people, to actually be a part of it. And the other part of that is how is it that that we are having this effect? And I lost my train of thought entirely.
That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
Good.
It happens to everyone. That's why we have hosts and co-hosts, so that the other one can pick up the ball where the ball got dropped, which is why we're here today. So yeah, but with this, but on the other hand, so here you're talking about, you don't want to wreck yourself by having all this paranoia because you're watching too many conspiracy videos.
Yeah.
And here you are taking a very constructive approach by getting involved in permaculture.
Well, I went through this phase. I call it the conspiracy phase, and it's kind of like the adolescent rebellion against authority and what are the problems, and we tend to blame other people instead of take full responsibility for ourselves in this process. As consumers, we're passive. That's what I was going to say.
Actually, sorry to interrupt, but that's what I was going to say, is that I think it's okay, all the conspiracy stuff and everything, because it wakes people up as long as they actually do something once they're woken up by that information, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. It did lead me to start questioning and thinking about things a lot, and I really I'm starting to lose my train of thought now. It's kind of, the ball is going around full circle, but to be more responsible, we have to develop our own way of producing and our own way of producing all of the things that we consume, right? So instead of being reliant on industries, this is the major thing, being reliant on industries to provide us with absolutely everything, we need to replace those industries with the grassroots means of production. And at a small scale, I'm not talking about undermining the current economic system. I'm just saying we can do it for ourselves, independent on the side, and still interact with the mainstream economic system for necessities that we like the internet and technology. We can't give it up. We like it too much, but we have to sort of leave it behind a little bit and take 2 steps back, like the old folklore says, is 1 step forward, 2 steps back. Well, we've been running forward for the last 100 years, and we haven't really taken a step back to say, what are the repercussions for what we're doing? And I mean, David Suzuki sums it up really nicely in the movie he made recently on his life and work. He's saying that we are bacteria in a closed petri dish, and there's a certain amount of food in the petri dish on Spaceship Earth, in this analogy, that the bacteria grow and grow and grow and multiply, in a very rapid way until there's many of them, and there's very little food left. And then there is this massive dieback to a very small amount of, and that's the human condition and dilemma in this state of the game, is that we are on an Earth with finite resources, and we are trying to...
There's hope. We die.
Well,
that's... And in that is the ultimate freedom, yeah.
Well, the interesting thing, though, is that I know that there is a certain amount of, I'll call it paranoia, it might not quite be the right word, but by people, and David Suzuki might be among them, but people who think that there are too many people on the planet, and that and that population continues to grow, using that bacteria analogy, that we might run out of food. But on the other hand, with things like permaculture, where we take our brain power and our collective brain power, made possible through things like the internet, that we can take its brain power applied to our environment, that can up the yields to the point where it need not be a situation where we're running out, because we are using our brain power individually and collectively to up the production.
And people like Scott, who were just on here, are doing that exactly, and God bless them. We need more of them. It's great that he's taking the initiative to do that and help people in the city, bridge that gap between consumer and producer, and it's absolutely necessary. And I grew up outside of the city in upper middle class rural paradise, where I was very much in connection with the earth at all times, and Boy Scouts and camping, and my family also owned a small greenhouse business for pretty flowers, and so I'm in an enviable position of having all the best sort of that society can provide, and then I've grown up and realized, I don't need all of these technologies. I would like to live more simply. I would like to have that connection, and going back to the permaculture principles in action, a lot of the modern secular society kind of devalues a lot of things. It's just a product. It's just a product. We don't have a connection with it. It comes to us perfect, and then when it breaks, we discard it, and it's meaningless. And so we're left with this void and this emptiness. And being part of nature, you realize you're part of something more, and you realize that connection, and you're fulfilled by, even in the act of discarding something, you're discarding it to the compost heap.
Well, and I feel great about that. When I throw the scraps of vegetables into that compost, I'm thinking
it's great, isn't it?
And you know what? Here's the thing. Like right now, I put it out on the curb, because in Toronto, they take it and they do a big mass composting. But I prefer to be doing that myself, like making my own soil.
Well, this is the thing that I like about this whole conversation, and even it ties in even to our guest who was talking about politics. We want more hands-on life. We want to have more, like, not just more involvement in our food, in our politics, or whatever it is. We also want to be able to know who it is that is doing these kinds of things and have a more personal relationship, like you're saying, connection. So we want to participate, and we want to know who's doing what in the whole system as part of your permaculture principles, right?
being from a rural area, I really see the potential in the rural areas. And what I'm seeing in the rural areas, though, is all of the youth are attracted by the glitz and the glamour and the materialism and just their own motivations as young people for parties and sex. They flock to the city and end up locked in. They want sriracha, yeah. They want it all, and who's to blame them? They've been raised by the television, consuming and thinking that they deserve all of the best society has given them without having to. There's this sense of entitlement,
Right.
and it's very difficult. How do we crack that? And it's austerity principles, and nobody likes that word because it means self-sacrifice. It means letting go of maybe those old technologies or maybe those.
What do you mean austerity principles? We don't want austerity principles.
We want plenty.
But we're being, in many cases, being forced into austerity by economic circumstances.
And it's because of responsible people at the very top. I like to think of the Illuminati not as bad guys, but as people who see that there is this critical mass that's being reached, and we need to prune back our consumption, or else we're going to go over the edge. Like David Suzuki says, we're going to consume all the resources and be left with nothing for anybody. And we do have to. There is austerity principles, and there's more to this too than just like feeding everybody. It's look at that, as the first world countries, we've been taking all of the third world countries' revenue and pushing them into the third world to keep the prices of our commodities low. And now we're seeing third world countries developing more, like Brazil and China and India. So the products are getting more expensive, but there is a global balance coming into shifting into a balance where more people are getting more. It's more equitable. It's not so much everything goes to the first world. Everything goes to.
Well, that's an interesting point, because when you talk about when people criticize NAFTA or free trade in North America, we have seen a shift of the jobs out of Canada and out of the U.S. into Mexico. We have, so that's.
But again, those people have jobs now. They can feed their families with, even if it's less money than we would be getting in this entitled culture. They're still able to provide the basic necessities for their own and work their way up a capitalistic ladder in the same way. And they're much more austere because they've been living with nothing. They've never had the middle class benefits of just getting everything without earning it.
And now, and now we see, as we in Canada are facing, high levels of unemployment, youth unemployment, we're seeing people realize that they need to be self-sufficient. And I think that's where the permaculture
and that's
ethos
why I think
comes in, right?
It's kind of madness to be trying to do it in the city. There's just no space. Everybody's crowded together. I mean, it's brilliant that Scott and others are trying to develop ways to increase production within the city. But outside the city, it's a vast wealth of land for very, very cheap comparatively to the city land. And you could be living sustainably out there, but it takes austerity principles.
But you need to, of course, though, just the way it is, we've seen farm sizes increase, right, in terms of the acreage, just because fewer farmers, and they need to have less profit per acre, so they need to expand their acreages.
Yeah,
but also there's I saw somewhere that the actual productivity per acre is higher on a smaller farm that's more human intensive rather than mechanical intensive. And it might be an optimal size of 5 or 10 acres or something like that, but I don't know what it's going to take to get us so that we can get our farm size back to those smaller numbers, get people more hands-on rather than large mechanized operations.
Well, I think one of those solutions is intentional community. I think that when you have an intentional community around you who shares some of your beliefs and who meet some of your needs and wants, especially needs, right? We need to be socially accepted, and we need to be loved by other people, and that's what drives people into the city a lot of the times, is that need and want for connection, and that they're not getting out in these like very, very sparsely populated rural environments. So now developing intentional community is a very difficult process. I've been involved in 3 or 4 communities at various stages of completion or inception, and seen more than a few of them fall apart based on petty politics and all of the web of linguistic confusion. that society is kind of filling our heads with, and media is filling our heads with.
Yeah.
Shit in, shit out.
And you
right?
need systems. You can't just have a bunch of groovy people with good intentions.
There has
right?
to be organization and accountability and responsibility.
I've seen the same thing, and the thing is that we have, when we come together as a community, we have really great plans, and we talk about our skills, and we forget that we're human beings, and that we have a psycho-emotional system that will come into play, and very often we don't consider people's emotions, and then people end up funneling their emotions into the organizational setting. So just for all of you who are planning intentional communities out there, make sure you take care of how people are feeling, and take care of their personal lives, and take care of their mental health.
Hard work good, hard work fine, but first take care of head. If you wanna work within a community, you have to let go of your personal ego in order to work and be compassionate for others, and be non-judgmental. Be non-judgmental towards others, because the second you pass judgment, truth, or trust and respect, it can be lost very quickly, and then you're
I'm going to say one
alone.
more thing about that, about intentional communities and some of the things, and that is that I think people have the wrong idea. They get into an intentional community, and because we've been so powerless in our communities to have anything to say, they're like, oh, finally I'm going to have the power to do what I want. And really, being in a community and being part of a community is about putting your personal preferences aside.
Well, also you need production. I mean, this is what people talk about, the problems of capitalism, but one of the things that money does, it gives people incentive to produce. And without production, we're nowhere.
Yeah, and
right?
that's why I think that right now we're at this really awesome time where the young thinkers who have amazing ideas can get together with what they call the old system, because then they can learn how to actually apply it and actually do it, because there needs to be some doing and ideas coming together. And maybe what the greater system does is not what we like, but they get it done, is what, you know what I'm saying?
That's right. The greater system does work, like it or not. It works too well. It works so well that we're stripping the earth of all of its diversity and all of its fertility and all of its, and we can try to patch those bandages, and yeah, it works. I mean, putting mining effluent on soils and fields does increase its productivity and does feed more people and create more humanity, but there's a sacred balance we're neglecting here. Yeah. And in our human hubris, in our we believe that we are the pinnacle and that all material flows towards us, but that's neglecting the core of permaculture principles, which is fair distribution. There's care for people, and there's care for environment, and there's fair distribution of resources between those all elements within a balanced system. And everything has flowed into humanity, and our population has skyrocketed, and we're trying to maintain this flow into humanity without austerity, without saying, let's take a step back, and
Can we
if you're
just send all the descended masters back? There seem to be a lot of ascended and descended masters. I run into them all the time. Can we just send them back and reduce the population, the surplus population?
Well, I mean, I think that we have compassionate overlords. If there is a conspiracy and if people are all worried about somebody else trying to control them, I propose the idea that they're not bad people trying to control us. They're good people who are trying to do the least amount of harm in bringing a balance back to society.
Then why are they creating satanic super soldiers?
I don't know that exists. Show me a satanic super soldier. I'll give him a big hug and hope that he doesn't. That we're not on the opposite sides of the political spectrum.
Thinks they're doing the right thing, right? The best of intentions.
Well, I mean, if our society is completely by choice, we have a wonderful society based on choice and merit, and people can choose whether they want to live in the city or live in a rural environment. People can choose whether they want to eat good food or fast food. People can choose whether they want to educate themselves or be passive consumers of television, and everybody is given that choice. And ultimately, if you want to be more responsible, you're going to teach yourself how to be more sustainable, to provide for yourself all of your core needs and your own wants as well. The television kind of gives you all of your wants. And people who aren't going to choose that are just going to be eating the industrial food and living the industrial life and having the industrial, what is that word? Planned obsolescence.
Yeah, because sooner or later
people are subject to it too.
Yeah.
So the choices you make directly influence your path in life. Of course, our system is based on this. So take responsibility. Don't blame the banks because you can't balance your personal budget. Your choices put you in the poorhouse. There are lots and lots of socialist programs designed to help people get out of that. If only you go out and find them and do the work yourself. It's merit. It's personal choice. And we can't keep blaming these systems. We can't keep putting ourselves in opposition to these systems. We have to think in terms of harmonious. You know, like the Conservatives have been reshaping Canada in ways that are enraging all of us. But it's helping to bring a balance. I'd like to hope ultimately it's bringing austerity to our civilization, and I'd like to see
you just found the positive
harmony.
Side of Conservatives for us, didn't you?
I'm trying to see like we can work with harmony with everybody. Not, you know, with all those institutions that are there. If they work, the banks, they work for us. If we work with them, if we just refuse to go in and point the finger at them for all of our ills, then they're gonna not want to talk to us, and they're not gonna want to.
I think we have to find something to learn about whomever it is.
You know, I just had an idea because, you know, like this all started in the 60s, right? With those hippies,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Rejecting the culture, rejecting the mainstream culture at the time. And you know, the older people at the time were surprised and shocked that the young people would turn their back on this society that was so good to them, right? And what you're saying, Tim, kind of is coming full circle, that maybe it is time to stop being against the culture and just recognize that, yeah, because when you walk into the bankers, they're trying to help you. And maybe it ain't a perfect system, but maybe we should, and it sounds like you've made a conscious choice to really try to work with the systems that are out there.
You can't beat them, join them. But that sounds kind of defeatist.
But I mean, you can still work
join
towards...
them doesn't mean that you let them usurp you. It means that you actually join.
No, stand in your power, yeah.
And use that to try to continue to build a better way.
We're all in it together, everybody.
Yeah, hallelujah. So we've been demanding more fair. I mean, the hippie movement or these movements have all been saying, you know, more rights for third world countries. Stop exploiting them. Stop exploiting them. And so what we've been seeing is a return to a balanced global economic system. And as a result, there are fewer jobs for us here, or fewer higher paying jobs. The cost of living is higher. The cost of food is higher because, you know, we can't ship it as easily or as cheaply from these other countries. And so we got what we wanted. But then, you know, now we complain because the cost of living is higher and now it's harder and austerity isn't being accepted, even though that's how we have to go about getting what we want, which is a more fair and equal world. We have to kind of scale back on our own consumption.
Well, I think we should have a bio-regional economy, and that would take care of a lot of things. There's things like on the West Coast that we don't eat. Like, sure, we're going to import our strawberries from California, but we have blackberries, we have Saskatoons, we have blueberries. I believe that we don't really even need to be austere about it. We just need to actually look at home in our own bioregion for all kinds of things that we're importing.
Okay, so Tim, not a lot of time left. So, but can we sum up here? And I don't know if you're looking for people to get in touch with you or.
I'm kind of a free agent. I'm part of a group called Project Rejuvenation, and we've done quite a few different projects, and we've been working with quite a few different organizations within this cultural movement we find ourselves in. I personally have been doing permaculture for about 7 years, and I've been raising plants and food my whole life. But you know, if you've got a project you want help with, Project Rejuvenation is a supportive network of people, and if you can get a hold of us, we have projectrejuvenation.ca or .net or .com. Try those, and I believe I have an email address there, Tim at Project Rejuvenation, and. I mean, we didn't even really get into any of the stuff I've been experimenting with. Like, I've got an aquaponics system, and I didn't have
Everybody's
tilapia.
got an aquaponics
Everybody,
system. I don't know what this is. I mean, I've just come here from the West in Toronto. And I find two things. Everyone's got a .com, and everyone has a hydroponics
Aqua. I built a 1,000-gallon one inside of a greenhouse, and I raised. I didn't raise tilapia because they're quite expensive and from a different environment entirely. They're from Australia, or no, Africa, I believe. They're from a very hot climate, and keeping a greenhouse hot in the winter makes it less economically
So what do you grow?
viable.
What do you grow then?
Well, I had rainbow trout. Rainbow trout do very well in aquaponics that you don't really even have to keep. You don't really have to heat. They kept the aquaponics from freezing over in the winter and stayed alive all winter under a thin layer of ice and are very adaptable. They require they're carnivorous fish. Tilapia are vegetarian, which are omnivorous, but that's a boon to them. I actually ended up scrapping I got sick of eating fish, and I said, well, hey, I'm going to cut the middlemen of the fish out of it, and I'm going to be my own producer. And I just peed into the thing. It's the same nutrients. Fish ammonia, fish pee is what feeds the plants. So why can't I use my own? So I peed into this thing, and the biology that was present.
That's a little too hands-on involvement.
Well, let me finish.
No.
Let me finish.
Better than pouring fish sauce all over
hands-on, I love it. Well, what I did, the bacteria, they break it down from uric acid into ammonia and into nitric acid, and it's, I don't know, I wouldn't call it a clean process with fish or with human, but the bacteria do break it down, and then the plants that ate it, I put two Southeast Asian herbs called brahmi and sushni. Bacopa monieri and sushni has a long Latin name, I can't remember. But they're both, brahmi is useful for encouraging nerve growth in brain and peripheral nerves. And sushni, and this is proven scientifically, I'm not just citing one of the less reputable sources, natural news or whatever. And sushni is an anti-stress nerve tonic as well. So I turned my own urine into brain herbs, into brain tonic formula, and I made tinctures out of it. And now I increase my own learning curve and capacities by transforming my own urine. So that's just the power of the permaculture principles that you can apply, right? You don't have to have fish to do it, and you're becoming more responsible, because what do we do with our waste normally? We flush it down the toilet and make somebody else responsible for it. Somebody in the government, an institution, a waste management institution,
That sounds delicious.
And so what we're doing is we're taking responsible for our own waste, and we're creating a connection with our environment. So we're coming full circle. What we eat comes out of us. We put it back into the earth, and that is a sacred connection. And some people would like, I like to call it a quantum connection as well, because the very minerals that you are in your body become part of the environment, become part of your body again, and you're taking care of the sacred cycle. And so that is another key way for people to realize their power as part of the system, as part of a circular system.
I'm going to find some ways to use my pee when the show's over. I'm going to think about that.
Oh, we'll follow you around with the camera.
Awesome.
Put it on your skin, drink it, do whatever you can, right?
I've actually heard of that.
I haven't done that.
I haven't done that either. Tim, just along the same, another example of what you're talking about there, because I heard about this, is that you put chickens, or you keep chickens in your greenhouse, because they're breathing out carbon dioxide,
oh, I see, right.
And that's what the plants breathe in, and vice versa. And and apparently that makes it's a lot more. You get way better growth by having that high carbon dioxide environment, by having chickens or some other animal in with the plants.
And I wanted to pass something on too. I hear people talking about heating their greenhouses. My grandfather came from India, and there's a few different things that he used to do. One is he kept a hothouse in Alberta and grew all year round. And what he did was he just dug trenches right underneath his greenhouse, and he filled that with hot manure. And then the heat would come right up there. It was like a jungle in there.
Hot poop.
So you might want to get some jungle chickens. Some chickens.
Where do you get
from
that hot
Africa.
poop in January in Alberta?
Again,
From
you
yourself.
have to follow the person around. Well, hot manure just
With a
means
camera?
Giving Scott another plug. I love the idea of chicken coop rooftop chicken coop. Oh, that's brilliant. I mean, I'm so happy that somebody is doing this, and I want to be a part of that because it's so useful.
I need to work
so
media into it.
good.
It needs to be that channel random
good.
poop camera.
We can put cameras on the chickens' heads. Chicken cams.
Chicken cams.
Other techniques, like we can do rooftop gardens without people knowing, right? Guerrilla rooftop gardens.
I think we should do
All
some
you have to do is
anarchist
find the
chicken poop
right
rooftop
plants and
gardens.
just throw the seed out on the roof, and they'll grow on rocks, on flat roof rocks, and the rose root. And there's another one that's very, very good. That's a native plant that produces little berries.
High in vitamin C. It's mucilaginous. It's almost like aloe vera. That rose root plant.
Rose root is
One
an
of my
excellent
favorites.
adaptogenic herb that will help
Are you
you
swearing
with
at me now,
whatever
or-
you adaptogenic.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll try to. We're on. Am I allowed to say that?
If you're allowed to say fish sauce,
Three Raja. Yeah.
you could say that.
We don't have any sponsors.
Okay, Tim, what else? Anything else you want to let us know about while you're here today?
No, I don't think I covered everything because there's
what was
just
the other
not
thing?
enough time.
What was the other thing?
No, I don't. I mean, I could talk at great. I've done free workshops on permaculture in the city, and I could just talk about it all day long. About things like how our modern diet has strayed from traditional herbalist European diet since the time of the witch burnings, right? And all that knowledge was lost. Well, I mean, we can just grow these things in our own gardens despite shade or despite poor soil quality. Things like yarrow and lemon balm will grow very, very like all over, and they are like immune system boosting, antioxidant superhouses, antibacterial superhouses, antidepressant. I mean, they're just educate yourself. Get out there online and just learn as much as you can and a pragmatic knowledge. Don't worry about who's trying to control your life. You are in control of your life. Try to fill your mind not with fear-mongering YouTube videos, and learn more about nature in your own backyard, and get connected with the people who are not so agitated and not politically charged in opposition to everybody. Get together with the people who are loving and harmonious, and trying to organize them, for crying out loud, because we need more organizers in this movement, and we're behind. The Americans are beating us in the sustainability movement. I know it. Detroit's doing a great job with food forests. Seattle's doing a great job with food forests and people taking control of their food security. And
Seattle
people
is
working.
building a park right now that is going to be full of edible fruits and vegetables available for anyone to eat. Wow. Did you know that?
I've seen that meme.
Okay.
I've seen that meme.
All right. Okay, Tim. So this is great. So projectrejuvenation.ca, right? People can get in
Or
touch with
.net
you.
or try a couple of dots just in case, because and you'll know it when it comes up.
Well, we'll put it in the credits. We'll test it and verify it. so
That's
people can see it in
wonderful.
the
Thank
credits.
you.
So that's great.
Yeah, and they're a wonderful group of people, and working with these communities within the city for the last. I've only been in the city for 5 years and in and out of the city, but working with all these groups of people, I've really learned a lot more about healthy communication and healthy interpersonal dynamics, because I was raised kind of on books and plants don't do a good job of talking back. They just
So find
listen.
Tim and give him a hug.
Yeah.
That's how he wants to relate.
And I'll give a hug right back, and we'll all be healthier and happier for
That's
it.
right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Tim. Thanks for coming in. So we'd love to have you back and
Thanks.
get into some of the things we didn't get into right now.
Yeah.
But we are going to, and I hear you about this conspiracy stuff, but they're going to have to learn how to grow food in those FEMA camps.
That's
Right? Before we get tossed at, like, do that stuff that Tim is suggesting now before you get thrown in a FEMA camp. And speaking of which, we've got, of permaculture and FEMA camps, we've got Mark Ansara coming on right after this.
That's right.
And he's with Permaculture GTA.
That's right.
But we're going to be talking about the Illuminati and how to get back at them.
That's right.
A solution.
The Illuminati.
So we're going to, in the meantime, we're going to find out about those chips that they want to chip us with.
Not salt and vinegar, kids.
No. And you're going to need one of these chips if you want to buy your fish sauce in the future.
And if you're at all good with technology, hack the chips so that you are in control of the chip. It's going to
watch
happen.
them. Don't let them watch you.
That's right.
Okay.
All right. Thanks.
I stumbled upon you this last January, and I thank God I did. You wrote an article this last July 29th. I will never forget it. And there was an excerpt in the article that alarmed me, and not much surprises me anymore, regarding the swine flu and the military, implementing the military to help out. And in the article, I know you don't reveal your sources, but I'd like you to elaborate about the metal shackles they're going to put on the wrists with the computer chip. And maybe Catherine Albrecht, you can add to that comment.
Unfortunately, I believe one among several plans to ensure that the government's edict of mandated vaccinations, and by the way, the state of Oklahoma last week passed through its House just such a law for the state of Oklahoma and its residents that everyone will be vaccinated in the state of Oklahoma. Now, having said that, there are also plans that will ensure that you do not freely travel, nor will you be able to really go anywhere without proof that you have had the vaccination at the point that the government mandates that certain levels of the population take the inoculation. When that happens, I have been told by state troopers across the country that there are plans ready to be implemented that would include roadblocks and choke points, as we call them, major interstate junctions around major cities and so forth, where the greatest number of people can be held until they are either prove their vaccination by papers, or in the case of a medical specialist in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, who told me that they had observed a semi-tractor trailer being unloaded at the hospital loading dock, pallets and pallets, scores of cases of metal bracelets that once put on would slip into a place and be either pegged in there with some kind of device to hold it in place, but the band was meant to be permanent. On top is a chip. That chip will include all kinds of information about you and the fact that you have been inoculated. Now, this is one of several plans. It has not yet seen the light of day, but it is there. It's in readiness. You choose the poison. It's either slow homicide or slow suicide. They're either going to kill you with the injection, or if you go up and say, sure, I just want to be able to go wherever I want to go, and you take it, to me, that's virtual suicide. It's slow motion suicide. So we've all talked about not getting the vaccination, that's clear, but you may not have a choice. I am told that the plans include buses that will be standing by for people at roadblocks that refuse to take the inoculation. The people will then be escorted to the buses and taken, as I was told in the state I was in at that time when I was speaking to the troopers, you're going to get a free ride to a nice warm bunk at Fort Riley. Well, it's one of several plans. We can't know until they're implemented, but I assure you that those plans are in place, and law enforcement is going to be pulled in. And one of the articles I wrote, I said the law enforcement community will enforce a new world order. There will be many that will not, and that's good news for us. But I believe it's still a majority that will be standing in line saying, get your shot, or get on the bus. That's what's coming.
All right, so you can see they're preparing to chip us all and to send us to FEMA camps where we can grow our own food if we're prepared. And we have mentioned Mark Ansara come on the show, who's with Permaculture GTA, but he's also written this book. The New World Order does exist. It's now official. Mark has written this book, but he's preparing to write a sequel, which is all about solutions, right, Mark?
Right. The new book, which may be a while before it's out, it may be 2 or 3 years, but I've been doing some further research, and I've begun working on some ideas for a new book, which will basically be a sequel to that one. This book talked about the problem of the New World Order, who's behind it, what their plans are, their agenda, and how they're trying to achieve those goals. And it's, you probably know, this is not a good idea. This is not good for the people or for the earth. I think the second book, I'm going to propose a detailed solution to this, an alternative to the New World Order.
Okay. Now, is that what we're talking about today? Are we getting into some of those things?
Mostly this, but I also have some updates on this. I've been doing some further research on the activities of the Illuminati and the New World Order, and I want to include that in the new book. But incidentally, if I may say, just to give myself a little plug here, as you probably know, I'm a health consultant.
Right.
I teach nutrition and natural hygiene and so on.
Yeah.
And I am going to be working at the health show that's coming up in the first weekend in April 4th, 5th, and 6th. It's called Total Health. It's at the Metro Toronto Convention Center here in Toronto.
I usually go to that show every time it's in town.
They've been doing this goes on every year in the spring.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll go this year.
And I'm there. I have a booth there. I've been there for quite a few years now. And I've made a few friends there. People have gotten to know me. I have a booth in which I sell. I'll have my book there for sale at the show. I also have some other literature related to health that I produce. And
do you have any urine remedies? Do you use that at all? In your
No. I'm strictly talking about basically nutrition, as I said, with natural hygiene. And the approach of natural hygiene is prevention. It's not treating symptoms or anything like that.
Right.
You know.
Okay.
So anyhow, I'm going to be at the health show in April, and I will have the book there, and people can come, we can talk. I want to prepare a little supplement to that, too, with some of the new information that I have about
Well, what is some of that new information that we should
Let me just
know
talk.
about?
I've been doing some further research, as I said, on the activities of the New World Order, or the Illuminati, if you like to use that term. And I've been looking at their involvement in political and economic projects of theirs over the last, during the 20th century, the last 60, 70 years. I think I found information that they were responsible, for instance, for bringing the United States into World War II with the attack of the bombing of Pearl Harbor.
Right.
That's one thing.
Yeah.
They were behind that.
Yeah, because the U.S. was against intervention
The
in the
U.S.
war.
did not want to be involved in the war in Europe, and it was the attack of Pearl Harbor that brought them into it. And that was engineered by the Illuminati, that attack on Pearl Harbor, because they wanted the United States to be involved, because the United States represents a major power and a lot of money, and they're making profit from the war.
Right.
You know, they make profit from both sides. They're bipartisan in this.
Okay. Now, I had heard that before. So what else did you find out?
Secondly, well, not specifically about that, but also they've been behind all of the major wars that we've had because they're making profit from it.
Yeah.
And it's also furthering their agenda because war kills a lot of people. It's furthering their agenda to reduce the world's population, to depopulate the earth.
Okay.
So at the same, while they're making huge profits from this, you know, by selling weapons, making weapons and things like this and other things, you know, to both sides, they're also seeing that a lot of people are being, you know, taken off the planet that way, killing them off. The other thing is they've also been behind a lot of things in past history like this. Of course, they've been responsible for things like, you know, they control the economy, they control the stock markets, they control the money supply of the world. And they've been responsible for things like the Great Depression of the 1930s and, you know, all the economic
Well, we heard they were going to crash the world economy last weekend.
Yeah, and I
don't know about last weekend, but I think that is their plan. Yes, that's the only way they're going to bring about this. They could do it, but I think they have some things that they still want to accomplish before that. For instance, like they've introduced the unified money, the euro in Europe.
Yeah.
You know, they want to do the same here in North America.
The Amero, they want it too, right?
You could call it that, I guess.
They've already printed some.
Have they?
Yeah, there's pictures of them on the internet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you see, there's still a few things they want to do. And they, as you mentioned, I think they want to get everybody microchipped as well.
That's what we just saw that video.
So that, therefore, that gives them, not only that does that mean that they can control everybody and monitor everybody, but it allows them to keep surveillance on everybody, everything everybody does.
You know what's funny? I just saw a movie last night. It's an actual 2-hour movie about that future where you can't do anything unless you're chipped, and what kind of world that is.
That's what they want. That's one of their goals.
Yeah. Do you think that's going to happen?
I hope not. I think I have a viable alternative to offer to this, and I think it may take a few years to get it into place, but I think we can do it. But we need to start working on it now. I need people to come and join with me and support my ideas.
Okay, what are these ideas?
Okay, may I just say one more thing? I was talking about updates to this. Here's a fact that most people probably have not heard. I read this in a local newspaper 2-3 years ago, I guess. And it was about, when the debt crisis, the economic problems in Europe were occurring several years ago. I think it was about 2009, maybe, when Greece was going bankrupt and things like this. You know what the Federal Reserve did? The Federal Reserve Bank, which is an agency of the New World Order. Right. They control the American money supply and so on. They print the money, distribute the money, and they can print unlimited amounts of money. There's no restriction on that. They can make money literally out of nothing.
Right.
So they could, therefore, solve all of the world's problems if they wanted to, simply by distributing money to everybody. They could eliminate poverty, you know. And anyhow, but what they did during the debt crisis in Europe then, the Federal Reserve, they donated essentially, in the form of interest-free loans and grants to the big banks and the big corporations in Europe. They donated, get this, $300 trillion to those banks and people in Europe.
Now
that's trillion with a T, not billion.
Yeah, that's what the debt probably is now.
Yeah, well, it could be, but that's a surprising figure. If they have that much money to play around with, as I said, they could eliminate poverty in America with no problem, no sweat.
Well, a trillion here, a trillion there.
Yeah,
but
$1 trillion is nothing to these people. No. They control the entire money supply of the world. You know, and that's the one of the what you might call an evil thing. Too much power in the hands of too few people.
Right, so is decentralization a part of the solution then?
In a way, yes. I haven't used that term, but I think, you're on the right track. What I want to see is an alternative world government to the New World Order.
Can I be president of the whole thing? Would you mind?
Anybody can run, yes.
Okay, great.
The idea is, look, the New World Order wants to establish a world government which is a fascist dictatorship, which would absolutely enslave everybody under it. There would be a few elite who rule over everybody and everything, own the whole planet, and everybody on it, and they see us as property either. To big business, individual people don't count. Individual lives aren't important. We're either assets or liabilities to them, and right now they think most of us are liabilities.
Right.
Now, by the way, you were talking about this with your last guest. I heard this. He said he thinks that the Illuminati are not necessarily bad people. I agree with that. This is one of the things I'm saying in my book here. Their plan is not evil. They are not evil people. They are trying to come up with a solution to the world's problems.
Are you sure? Because I heard that they were actually all Luciferian devil worshippers.
They support that, but this is just part of their way to want to control people through that.
And that this whole thing is not even their plan.
Here's their idea. I think they believe that the world is overpopulated. There have been studies done since the 1960s that suggest that.
I don't buy it myself.
I don't buy it either, and I say so in the book.
We just need more freeways.
Yeah, that's right.
They feel that the world is overpopulated because they feel, as somebody said, some environmentalist back in the 70s said, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. Right. And most people are contributing to the problem of pollution and, cluttering up the planet with waste and things like this.
My friend has a T-shirt. It says, proud to be part of the problem.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think the Illuminati are thinking that if they reduce the world's population by, say, 90% of the present population, reduce it to under 1 billion people, maybe about 10% of what it is now, that means there won't be enough people around to greatly contributing to the world problems. I think that's only a partial solution at best, and it's a rather drastic solution, what they're offering here. But I think their intentions are good in the long run.
Okay.
They're not evil people. Their plan is intended to help, but it's drastic, and the consequences of this, the problems, the side effects, if you like, of this plan are unacceptable. I have a better
again,
solution.
I would say, like I said about before, I think a bioregional culture, politics, and economy. I think that
I'd like you to explain what you mean by that.
Well, throughout the history of humankind, we have had cultures that have the biosphere, the land itself has dictated art and culture and politics. And I think that there needs to be a return to that again. So I would say decentralized, bioregional politics, a structure that, right.
Okay, fair enough.
Or we could all live in a biodome.
Yeah, made of urine.
Yeah.
Well, you would have to use the urine.
Yeah, to wash the walls. I think it's good for that, isn't it?
And brush your teeth if you have to.
Oh.
There's no fluoride.
I think urine is a resource that can be recycled and reused for different things.
I wish it was a different color.
It can be purified, so, anyhow.
Okay, back to the solution.
But get back to what I was talking about. I think that the Illuminati, their idea is they want to reduce the world's population because that'll reduce the number of problems. I think this is only a stopgap solution. It's only a temporary solution. It's not going to eliminate the cause of the problems in the first place. It's going to reduce the number of people who are causing the problem. It's like saying you've got 10 people out there armed with weapons and they're killing people, shooting you, and you. And so if you eliminate 9 of them, you'll have fewer people being killed. But there's still going to be people being killed going on from the one who's left with that gun. You want to eliminate that problem completely by addressing the cause of it. This is my approach in health too. We don't treat symptoms, for instance, in natural hygiene.
So what do we do,
We deal
Mark?
with causes. We try to eliminate the causes, and then you don't need to worry about the symptoms, the effects. Okay.
So maybe we should eliminate the Illuminati.
I'm not saying we should eliminate anybody completely, but I'm going to propose a whole new idea, a whole new playing field that will provide an alternative to this. Their idea is a fascist dictatorship government which will take away people's rights and freedom and enslave them under it. They'll say, you've got to do what we say or we'll eliminate you. Right. And people won't have any choice if they're dependent upon them for support, for food and money and livelihood and so on. I say what we need is the exact opposite of this dictatorship. We need a government that supports democracy, human rights, and freedom. And justice for everybody, justice and equality for everybody.
Right.
And that's the only real alternative to this.
So how do we do that?
Well, by establishing shall we say, what's the word? A number of people, an association of people who want to, start a new political party, for instance, that would be a truly democratic party. And to me, true democracy means the people are in charge. The government does not rule over the people. The government is there to listen to the people's will and obey that.
Right.
That
people
is important.
Pardon? Say that again.
That is very important because because everything has gotten backwards, and now and like you say, the government is the strong arm that tells us what to do.
Yeah.
Really, we only put the government in place so they could help us organize.
I think the government is a public servant. The politicians are elected to help the people, not to tell them, pass new laws and tell them you can't do this or you can't do that or we're going to punish you for this and that and so on. It's not government's place to do that. Nobody should play God and decide, this is how you should live your life, and otherwise I'm going to eliminate you or something, or throw you away or something, lock you up somewhere or kill you. Nobody should tell people how to live their lives. Nobody should tell people, what they can do and what they can't do. Nobody should decide who lives and who dies. Nobody has that right.
Right.
No, but
nobody can play God.
But then we're stuck with, I think the gun that the Illuminati are holding, in that scenario that you said, is globalization.
Yes.
I think that if, in my opinion, if people want to, have a rule whereby if you steal, we cut your hand off, I think that's okay. As long as they do it over there.
That's not my idea, but I'll tell you more. Go on.
And they don't want everyone to do it. I think that's the problem with religion. In fact, I think that's the problem with individuals personally. I think if people don't agree with us or want to do what we want to do, we kind of act crazy. And I think it is the concept of globalization or the concept that we have of everybody doing one thing that is actually the issue.
Mm-hmm. Well, you talked about, somebody steals, you cut off their hand. I think as part of my plan, my platform for a democratic world government is, I said justice must be part of it. And the proper way I think, to establish justice is the punishment needs to fit the crime. And what I would say, if you steal something, the punishment for that is not to, lock you up in jail or anything like that, or subject you to whatever, kind of punishment, torture or mutilation or something, as you suggested. The idea is you have the perpetrator of a crime has to compensate his victims adequately. If you steal money from me, the proper punishment, I think, or the proper form of justice is for you have to compensate me to the extent that you took from me.
Yeah.
That's the only solution to this. That eliminates a lot of waste in government and in our legal system too, by the way.
But I have a question.
There would be little need for police or jails or court or anything like that.
So you really think that there should be, like, okay, you don't like the idea that we have, of course, the one world government, that is the Illuminati, but you think that should be replaced with another government that would actually put together a global agenda? I think that the
Illuminati are well on the way to achieving their goals, and if we don't do something different, they're going to achieve everything that they want within a few years.
I think we need to turn those FEMA coffins into cat shelters.
Could be.
Yeah, I want to know, without using our urine, how do we stop them?
Or using our urine. I'm willing to use my urine.
We do
As
have
I said,
people
I
that are
think
willing.
urine is a resource that can be recycled.
And poop, hot poop. We can use those to heat the greenhouses.
Yeah, well, there's
Okay,
been,
hot poop, then I'm in. No.
There has been talk of of using manure, of course, in permaculture. So I mean, I'm not. I have no strong objection to it, but I do say one thing. I think I am part of my program, which I mentioned in that book there very briefly, is I think we need to first of all improve people's lives. We need to work on their health issues and get them to be healthier, stronger, live longer lives, and be smarter, thinking more clearly. And the health program that I teach is a part of that. We need to get people interested in taking charge of their health, not being dependent upon the system for doctors and drugs and things like this, but everybody should know how to take care of their own health. It's a basic thing that everybody should know. We're not being taught this in the schools today. We're not being taught about the cause of disease. The medical profession takes over and it says, you're not responsible for your health problems. It's caused by, germs invading your body and attacking your body. And, you get sick. It's okay. You haven't done anything wrong. You come to us, we'll give you a drug and it'll be all right again. That's not a good answer. That's not addressing the causes, and it's only going to create more problems down the road doing that.
Agreed.
Absolutely.
There's side effects from all these drugs, for instance.
We should have a government that I think, from what you've said, that is just about health. I would vote for a government.
I think
that
one of the
just
things, if I get this,
wanted
if
to
we
make
can
us
establish this, when we can establish this democratic government, I think some of the things that we'll be going about doing is initiating health reforms. For instance, we need to teach people about health and about nutrition. We need to educate them. They've been lied to all along by the medical doctors and the drug companies. The cause of disease is not germs, it's not bacteria, it's not things like that. It's lifestyle and diet and things like drug use. Drugs are a cause of disease in people. It's not it's not something that's
and you
required
mean the
for
drugs
health.
they're giving us to heal us are causing the problem.
I don't know if you'd use the word heal us there, but the drugs are used to treat symptoms, to suppress symptoms. And that's not addressing their health in a holistic way, and it's not dealing with the causes of their disease in the first place. They need to understand what really causes disease, and it's things like poor diet, poor lifestyle, and perhaps an unhealthy environment. Mm-hmm. And if we can get that idea through to people and teach them this, then they will, on their own, perhaps start to improve those conditions. They will start to improve their diets and their lives, and they eventually want to clean up the environment because that's important to everybody's well-being.
Okay. Now, Mark, we're just about out of time.
Okay.
But is there one final thought you want to leave people with?
I think that if we want to all work together on this, if enough people support this idea, we can make it work. We can stop the Illuminati. The Illuminati their plan is a poor idea, and I think they probably know it, but they haven't got any other solution. They think that we are not ready to take the responsibility of ruling ourselves and governing ourselves. I think we have to, because we have no choice. It's either enslavement and loss of everything that we have accomplished, and if the Illuminati get their way, that will call a halt. It will kill the human spirit and call a halt to progress. I think there's a lot of things we can do, that would be a better way. And I think we have to do it because we have no choice.
Okay. And one thing that people can do is they can get their hands on your book, Mark.
Yes.
The New World Order does exist. It's now official. And then there's a sequel going to come out with solutions. Mark, where can people get a copy of this book?
Well, they can contact me directly. They can they can contact me through my website. I can give you my contact information.
Yeah, what's the website?
The website is www.advancedwellnessstudies.com. My book is on there. It's not fully set up yet the way I would like it, so people can't just submit a payment to me on the website, but they can contact me.
Okay, so they can go to advancedwellnessstudies.com and
yes.
contact you from there.
Also, as I said, I'm going to be at the Total Health Show in Toronto in the first weekend of April. People can see me there.
And you'll be selling the books there?
The books will be available for sale there.
Fabulous.
Great.
And we got Marcus Rothkranz coming on the show that weekend, who's also going to be at the Total Health Show coming in from Las Vegas.
Very cool.
So it's going to be fantastic.
You're going to help the Illuminati get healthy. Is that what's happening?
Yes, that and a lot more. Using hot poop.
Okay, well that sounds delicious. The whole show I think was awesome, and all I can say is I was really happy to be your co-host today, Hugh.
It kind of worked well, and we got into some interesting areas, but it was fun, and we'll have to come out with something in addition to fish sauce for the next show.
We will.
Fish sauce and hot poop and urine, which is the theme today.
Maybe a cooking show.
Make sure to bring the, you know what.
That's right.
Okay. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time here on thatchannel.com.